everybody. This is the April 20th, 2022 morning session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, good morning. Please call the roll.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Present.
Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here, under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city's made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting's available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, as well as channel 30. The public may provide written testimony to the council by emailing our council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. And if there's any other questions, you can also reach the council clerk at councilclerk@portlandoregon.gov with any questions you might have. With that, we'll turn this over to legal counsel to hear about the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions, reports, or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at www.portland.gov/council agenda contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose that you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. It seems we have not updated the council attorney's statement regarding what the public can testify on. So I just wanted to put that on the record that public can sign up to testify on reports or whatever else they want to.
Thank you.
We do have a public testimony available on resolutions, reports, and first readings of ordinances, as I stated. If there are additional changes, we'd be happy to make those.
All I heard you say was ordinances. I didn't hear the other pieces, so I just wanted to make sure. I did not hear that in your public statement.
Okay. Would you like me to repeat it?
Nope. If you said it and we all agree that that's the rules, I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
All right. Thank you, everybody. First up, as is tradition, is communications. First individual, please, Keelan, item number 285.
Request of Skywalker to address council regarding a ban on foie gras products.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. Hello, City Council members. Thank you so much for letting me speak today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll try and keep this brief. My name is Sky, and I'm wrapping up my third year at Lewis and Clark Law School. Before law school, I studied political science at Oregon State University. I was born in downtown Portland at the Good Samaritan Hospital, and I've lived in the Portland area my whole life. I've been pretty active in government and politics here in Oregon, advocating for legislation relating to climate change, funding for higher education, as well as pandemic prevention. But one topic that I feel quite strongly about and that I wanted to speak to you guys with today is foie gras production. I think foie gras production is a public policy issue. I think it implicates animal welfare, human health and safety, as well as environmental health. And I think in today's day and age, there's kind of a heightened awareness around how we grow, raise, and process our food. I think that citizens, not just in Portland or in the US, but around the globe, are becoming less tolerant of animal cruelty associated with food production and are demanding changes. For instance, cage-free eggs, free-range chicken, antibiotic-free Poultry, humane certified beef, these are increasingly showing up on service menus and in grocery stores throughout the country. And we've seen a rapid increase in plant-based alternatives to the meat and dairy products as well. I think that the culture around food production is changing in the United States, and particularly in Portland. And I do think that it's the job of elected officials to respond to changes in public opinion and to legislate where appropriate. Foie gras production is very concerning to me. For obvious reasons, it causes the birds immense pain and suffering, as well as a 20% increase in mortality rates among the birds. And as a result of that, those animals are more susceptible to avian influenza. There have been hundreds of bird flu outbreaks at poultry farms around the globe, and those are just the ones that are reported. Industrialized poultry farms have a considerable impact on natural resources as well, particularly air and water. And based on my study at Lewis and Clark, I specialize in environmental law. And from my studies, I found that EPA does very little to regulate this industry. And so for those reasons, I don't think foie gras production is worth the risks, and I don't think it's worth the harms associated with it. And for that reason, I want to make clear my support for a ban or any sort of restrictions or further regulations on the practice. That's it. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you. And Sky, we were born at the same hospital, although I suspect I may have been born there a few years ahead of you.
That's awesome.
Thanks for your testimony. Keelan, next individual, please. Item 286, please.
Request of Katie Bestor to address council regarding a ban on foie gras products.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for allowing me to testify today. My name is Katie Bester, and I'm a first-year student at Lewis and Clark Law School. And as a local resident, I'm also urging you to ban the sale of foie gras. We are all too familiar with the negative impacts of pandemics, such as the physical, mental, social, and economic tolls. Because of the overwhelming evidence pointing to the relationship between consumption of animal products and the origination of diseases, it's obvious we should be scrutinizing and eliminating other practices that pose such health risks. An obvious place to start would be to ban the sale of foie gras. Because of the constant abuse that they endure, ducks and geese on these factory farms have weakened immune systems, making them especially susceptible to bird flu infections. This is an alarming, as it can spread to humans and lead to disease outbreaks. In 2020 alone, France registered 475 outbreaks of avian influenza at poultry farms, the vast majority of these being from the foie gras operations. To eliminate the risk of such outbreaks, many places have chosen to take preventative measures, and the public has been very supportive of that. Portland is a bit behind, as New York City, the entire state of California, as well as several countries, the UK, Germany, Italy, Norway, Portland, Turkey, Israel, India, have already banned the sale and or production of foie gras. Besides the infections, as we have already heard, the production also contaminates waterways, manure, slaughter, and with the slaughterhouse waste. And there are attempted regulatory protections. The EPA points out that foie gras operations have numerous recorded violations of the important environmental laws that we have in place to restrict that. Additionally, the production of foie gras threatens the habitat of endangered species through deforestation. The actual methods used to produce foie gras are horrific and substantially increase the health and environmental risks associated with the practice. It involves violently inserting a 10 to 12-inch metal or plastic tube down the bird's esophagus and rapidly delivering huge amounts of concentrated grain, fat, and compressed air into the bird via a hydraulic pump. The animals are force-fed up to 3 times a day for several weeks until their livers become diseased, after often growing up to 10 times its normal size. This force feeding causes the bird extreme pain and suffering, which continues for several weeks. Considering the established evidence, we would like to think that the USDA and other regulatory agencies would not allow such inhumane and detrimental practices to continue. However, the law is slow, especially on such a large scale. By taking action now, the Portland community can take a stand against foie gras, protect human health, the environment, and the lives of innocent animals. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate your being here. Next individual, please, Keelan. Item number 287.
Request of Rachel Watsky to address council regarding a ban on foie gras products. Rachel hasn't joined us yet.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to the next individual, please. Item 288.
Request of Brenna Bell to address council regarding shade equity and investment in tree maintenance.
Good morning, Brenna.
Good morning. My name is Brenna Bell, and I'm the Forest Climate Manager for 350 PDX. And I'll just start by adding, I'm an alum of Lewis and Clark Law School, and I'm really supporting these student activists showing up and suggest you listen to them for their ban for foie gras. That was a nice surprise. But you all have seen me twice recently talking about the need for the city to make a long-term investment in maintaining street trees to ensure that Portland has a thriving and equitable urban canopy. So I'm hopeful that your budget proposal will include this funding for new street trees, as well as figuring out how the city can maintain those trees into the future. And as I've said before, time is of the essence, and we cannot afford any more delay. But since I already covered that pretty well on Saturday, today I want to talk a little bit more broadly about planning for Portland's future. In the beginning of Saturday's budget listening session, Mayor Wheeler, you said you didn't want to budget for 2019. You want to make a budget for the next 30 years. And Commissioner Hardesty, you reminded us all that the budget is a moral document. How then can we make budget decisions today that withstand the moral judgment of Portlanders 30 years hence? Now, this may seem like an almost impossible question. I know that you're facing so many diverse issues and all of them are competing for limited funds. But I want to make a case for you to invest in the one overarching issue that affects us all, and that is only going to become harder to address with each passing year: climate change. And to be clear, climate change does affect us all, but it affects marginalized communities the most. And we are already seeing the adverse and unjust effects of climate instability and are way behind in creating the resilient community that our future needs. So as you move forward with the budget and with all higher level planning, I encourage you to think about every issue as it relates to climate change, because they all do, and ask yourself 3 questions. 1, how does this decision mitigate the extent to which Portland contributes to climate change? 2, how does this decision help people adapt to the increasing impacts of climate change? And 3, how does this decision ensure that the city's actions and resources support first and foremost those who have been and continue to be exploited and oppressed? So mitigation, adaptation, and justice. It's what our city of the future is demanding we do today to ensure that they have a nourishing place to call home. And I want to close by asking you all, please dig up Vision PDX and see what the Portland of 13 years ago hoped that the Portland of today would be. I was part of the committed team that engaged 15,000 Portland residents about their hopes and dreams for this city, and believed that we created an amazing vision that unfortunately lost momentum when city leadership changed. But if you want to create a budget for the future, look a bit to the past and take inspiration for Portland in a more hopeful time. It's easy to find. Just Google Vision PDX. That vision might still resonate today and help guide you through the hard decisions ahead. Thank you for all your care for Portland.
Thank you, Brenna. Appreciate it. Next individual, please. Item number 289.
Request of Nicole A. Lorg to address council regarding homelessness solutions and a new way of eating. Nicole has not arrived yet.
All right. And did the other individual, I think it was Rachel, did she show up yet?
No.
Okay, very good. Then why don't we go to the consent agenda, please? It's my understanding one item has been pulled off of consent.
2 items have been pulled, 294 and 296.
294 as well as 296. Please call the roll on the remainder of the consent agenda.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the consent agenda has been adopted. We'll return now to the first time certain item, please. Item number 290.
Accept the 2021 annual report of the North and Northeast Neighborhood Housing Strategy Oversight Committee.
Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. And thank you, colleagues, Housing Bureau staff, and Dr. Holt and the fellow committee members for joining us today for this report on the North-Northeast housing strategy. Nearly 7 years ago, Portland City Council approved the North-Northeast housing strategy. And now Portland Housing Bureau and their community partners are meeting or exceeding the goals set at that time. The overall homeownership goal of the North-Northeast housing strategy is 210 new homeowners to be met by 2022. Currently, 98 new homeowners have been created since 2017. And I am told that we are confident we are on track to meet that goal of 110 this year. So let's talk about those 98 new homeowners. 96% of them are of BIPOC households. The new homeowners have been created through a combination of down payment assistance and new construction of affordable homes. The annual number of new homeowners has ranged from 4 in 2017 during a ramp up to 37 in 2020. There are still more than 300 households on the waiting list for home ownership as part of the North-Northeast housing strategy. The Portland Housing Center is working on with 152 households to become mortgage ready, with 10 who are ready right now to become homeowners and 33 more within 6 months. Hence the confidence in us being able to exceed our goal this year. The only remaining resource for the new homeowners is the Interstate Corridor Urban Renewal Area Tax Increment Fund, and there is only enough remaining to support 16 new City of Portland down payment assistant homeowners. Colleagues, I want to be clear that even though we are confident that we will reach our original goal in 2022, there is still more work ahead of us. I want to specifically highlight my focus on land use policies and public funding to create more low to moderate income homeownership opportunities in the city, and the ways we at City can partner to be more intentional about focusing our policies and resources on closing the racial equity homeownership gap and create intergenerational wealth. I truly believe our city can only achieve its racial equity goals through strong partnerships with housing providers and authentic relationships with the community. That's why I'm excited for our presentation today. That will include data through December 2021 with all the strategies, and as well as the preference policy in minority-owned, women-owned, and emerging small business participation. I'm now going to hand over the mic to Dr. Stephen Holt, who serves as a North-Northeast Oversight Committee Chair, to take us forward. Dr. Holt, please take it away.
Good morning, Commissioner Ryan. I don't see Dr. Holt on. I know he was in another meeting that may have run long. We could go on ahead and do the data presentation and then come back to him if that's your preference.
Leslie Goodlow, you got this. So I will follow your lead. So
Okay,
take it away.
If we could have the slides pulled up, please. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Leslie Goodlow. I'm the Equity and Business Operations Manager for the Portland Housing Bureau, and I am one of the executive sponsors of the housing strategy, as well as I staff the committee for the Oversight Committee. So next slide. We have a committee of 9 members currently, and we are going to be seeking four more people for the committee as we can go up to 13. And I will let Dr. Holt, when he comes on, talk about his committee. Next slide. So first off, I'm going to talk about a few of the accomplishments of 2021. The Housing Bureau was able to provide rent assistance to all 6 of our preference policy buildings in excess of $1 million, assisting 261 residents. Kaiser Permanente donated a piece of property on Interstate for affordable housing. They will be working out a deal with whichever developer is selected for that site, and those units will be subject to the North-Northeast preference policy. The new PHB asset preservation pilot served 45 households with assistance around wills and passing their property on to their families and how to protect their property moving forward. And then in 2021, we had 29 more preference policy families become homeowners, increasing us from the total from 65 to 94. And that's through December of 21. Next slide, please. This map just shows where we have invested funds from the housing strategy. The blue are sites that are currently vacant. 5020 was going to be our condo project, and it, as was discussed last year, fell through due to pricing and funding related to COVID. But the red dots are our rental properties and the green dots are home ownership developments that we have supported. Next slide. So going into strategy 1, preventing displacement. This slide shows the number of unduplicated grants and loans that we have given since 2015. Even during the pandemic, we have been able to assist families with needed home repairs in order to help them stay in their homes. Next slide. The slide on the left shows the race and ethnicity of for the grants that we have awarded. Overwhelmingly, these grants have been gone to people of color, specifically Black residents. And for home repair loans, we are just about equal between Black and white residents. We have found that a lot of folks of color have not been able to qualify for the loan program due to having reverse mortgages. And we are currently evaluating both the loan and the grant program to determine whether we continue to do loans or if we move to an all grant program. Next slide. This is the asset preservation program, some statistics. We had a goal of doing 2 webinars for estate planning. We ended up doing 20. We wanted to serve 40 people. We served 229 that participated in those workshops. And we have 31 people that have fully enrolled in the program to get their estate planning done. And then the slide on the right is the race and ethnicity of those program participants. 28 of the 31 have been Black. Next slide. So creating new homeowners, the slide on the left shows the funding sources that have paid for the new homeowners. We have several of these that are TIF, paid for by TIF. So we had Northeast TIF, which is interstate, Prosper Portland TIF, which is also interstate. The Olin project and the Kenton Commons were both paid for out of interstate TIF. And then we had 2 homeowners that were able to use Lentz TIF. The slide on the right shows the progression of the homeowners, as Commissioner Ryan mentioned, that in 2017 we had 4, and now we have 104. And we are sure to meet our 2022 deadline or 2022 goal of 110. Next slide. This is some new information. For the AMIs of the home buyers, you can see that we have folks from 111 to 120%, all the way down to less than 40%, with most people being between 61 and 70% of AMI, which is pretty significant that people below 100% of AMI were able to purchase a home in Portland's market. The race and ethnicity, 80 of our 104 have been Black, and 90 or most folks were BIPOC. Next slide, please. Some information about the homes that our preference policy folks were able to purchase. 83% of them were able to purchase a home with 3 or more bedrooms. 71% had more than 1.5 bathrooms. The average sales price was $359,972, and they ranged from $250,000 to $522,000. Next slide. This map shows where our 104 folks have purchased their homes. Most of them, of course, are in Northeast and within the interstate corridor. The folks in Southeast or outside of the district were able to purchase using either CET or short-term rental funds that we put into down payment assistance. And then that red area down at the bottom, that's Lentz. That's the Lentz TIF district. Next slide. So these are two of our home buyers, one of which you're going to hear from in a little bit. But Farrah Kelly, I have known her since I was about 13 years old. We lived down the street from her parents, and she sent us a statement. She said that she's very happy with her new home. It is small, but it's enough. She's grateful for the preference policy program's assistance, which created an opportunity for her to live 5 minutes from her mother, who is now legally blind. Living in the community where she grew up is deeply meaningful. And although in some ways it does not feel like a community she shared, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else but Northeast Portland. Next slide. This is an update on the preference policy buildings that who have been opened in the last couple years. They are all fully occupied, and you can see that we've added the status, the percentage of BIPOC residents in each of the buildings. Charlotte B. Rutherford is 94% BIPOC, which with King Parks being 93%, and the lowest being Renaissance Commons at 79%. Next slide. We have 3 new projects that will be subject to the preference policy that will be closing and starting construction in the next year or so. 5020 North Interstate, I mentioned earlier, was originally a condo project. It'll now be a rental project. 64 units being developed by Self-Enhancement and Community Development Partners. That's going to be paid for out of Metro Bond and with PHB Land. 64 units. PCRIs and Second Story will be building the Alcina that's specifically targeted towards seniors. 37 of the 75 units will be subject to the preference policy. And again, that's another bond project. And then finally, Albina 1 with AVT and Edlin and Company. 78 of the 94 units will be subject to the preference policy. The units that are not subject to the preference policy either have Section 8 project-based Section 8 vouchers or are PSH. And so that's why they're not subject to the preference policy. Next slide.
Excuse me, what is PH? What did you just say?
Oh, permanent supportive housing. I'm sorry. I know, it's too many acronyms. So our next couple of slides are around our DMW ESB participation, home repair. You can see the cumulative of the participation of people of color in for our loans. And then on the right, it is for grants. So next slide. This is gender information. So women participation, particularly in FY 21-22, went up to 19.77% from 7.89%, which is a significant increase of women in the trades. But our apprenticeship hours went down in 21-22 from 21% to 4.69. And we believe that that change was due to some of the projects that the apprentices were on ended early in 21. And so their hours were finished. Next slide. For rental construction, again, this is apprentice participation by race and ethnicity. We have significant Hispanic participation. African-American is a little lower. And then also annual workforce participation by race and ethnicity, Hispanic significant, and African American we are a little behind on, but we are working to improve that and increase that participation. We found that a lot of folks are just really busy and taking on other projects. And so we've not been able to increase that number as much as we'd like to. Next slide. So this slide is unduplicated applicants to the preference policy. We've had a total of just about 6,000 people apply over the course of us opening the preference policy list. 1,622 folks for home ownership, 3,782 for rental, and 612 have applied for eminent domain. And you can see here that over 3,000 of the applicants are Black African American. Next slide. So Dr. Holt texted me that he's now on, so I'm going to let him jump in and finish us up.
Well, good morning, everyone. Actually, Leslie, I'll let you do the summary and I will come in on opportunities, since
Okay.
The summary really speaks more to PHB than.
Okay. So for the 2021, we were really excited that PCRI was able to lease their first floor retail space to a Black-owned daycare center. 50/20, as I mentioned, was included in the fall NOFA, and it will be funded out of Metro funds with self-enhancement and community development partners. We were able to use the plans and the permits that were already developed from the condo project. We were able to fund over $1 million in rent assistance to preference policy tenants. We hired the 2 preference policy staff that council approved in last year's budget. We assisted 30 families to become homeowners. Renaissance Commons, we were able to get fully leased with a joint effort between the joint office and the Urban League to assist folks that were homeless or to move into those units. And then we did have some issues of some complaints from some of the buildings about package and grocery deliveries, building safety, office hours. And so PHB and the committee discussed those things with Renaissance specifically, but in general, working with our rental partners to ensure that folks that move into those buildings have the best possible access and can feel safe in their buildings. Okay, Dr. Holt.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's almost comical that the very first time that we're actually on time for our time certain, I'm late. So that's comedy. But good morning, good to see you, commissioners, and Mr. Mayor, good to see you. It's been a little bit. If you will go to the next slide, I'd appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about the opportunities, and then I want to make sure we hear from some other members and then our homeowner. Through the waiver with Home Forward, as you can read, there was an opportunity for someone to actually use a Section 8 voucher to purchase a home. I think this creates a great opportunity for us to think about how to help bridge this widening gap of home ownership opportunities for Black and Brown people and other communities of color, and specifically those who are under the poverty level or in the median income. With the challenge of what's happening in the city, if we're going to make sure the promises made become promises kept, we're going to have to think about other ways to expand. And one of the things I appreciate, Mayor, was early on as you stepped into the seat, you increased the subsidy to support this effort. The distance is widening, and so other ways that we can lean in and leverage that opportunity would be significant. again, that promises made become promises kept. We're looking forward to setting some new goals with the dollars that have been allocated through the tax increment set aside, this maximum indebtedness, which we supported 100%. And then City Council approved last year. So we're looking forward to some creative pathways in order to solidify how we help people become homeowners. The community engagement for the land bank opportunities that have already been set aside in the ICURA. We're going to begin early this summer and fall, or continue to think through how we get the community around these opportunities with these new sites to accomplish the goals that have been identified. How do we keep creating homeowners? We understand that that's central, that community is enhanced, that children do better, schools do better when we've got homeowners. We understand that. Of course, it's affordable rentals and so forth, but homeownership is a passion for us. It's another opportunity. The preference policy, it continues to demonstrate that people want to live in Northeast Portland. There are over 6,000 applications through the duration of the time. So that we've had this as an opportunity. So people continue to be involved. One of the greatest things that we were able to accomplish is having this ongoing open list so that people can continuously apply and get their names in the loop because of the value and the significance associated with it. Now, I've mentioned that we've got a gap, and the gap is widening. Now, I brought this up before about creative ways to leverage how we can secure other funding and other ways to help people get into home ownership. And I don't know of all the possibilities, but I would love for us to explore it and explore it collectively to help in this process. And then we're looking forward to continuing to hear from Portland State regarding their own ongoing research, supporting empirical data that tells the story of the preference policy. So in front of us, the work continues. For some of us, it's been the entire time. I got involved in 2014, and the committee was set up in 2015. And we're committed to rolling our sleeves up and staying involved until the end. And to that extent, I'd love to hear from Jillian Siraj, who's been a part of this work. And then we're going to have an opportunity to hear from one of the homeowners. So Jillian.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, Mayor Wheeler, commissioners. I'm excited to share with you, or for us to share with you, the successes that this committee's had. Some of you may know me already. I've been on the Oversight Committee since 2016, and I also develop affordable housing as the housing director of SEPA. This report and today has been mostly about our successes, which I won't reiterate, as Dr. Holt and Ms. Goodlow have already spoken eloquently about that. What I would add is that this policy and my time on the committee were an opportunity to address the impacts of housing inequity, specifically the disproportionate displacement of Black Portlanders from Northeast Portland due to gentrification as a direct result of city policies. What I would like the council to reflect on is that this success took time. It took ingenuity, it took guts and chutzpah and grit. There was a time when this strategy was called a failure in this council meeting. But few things that are worth doing are easy, and they often need trial and revision to get it right. They take initiative, they require funding. As this council continues to address the impacts of white supremacy on housing in Portland, I hope that you will remember real change and lasting impact take time, and that we shouldn't consider policies and programs failures before they have had a chance to succeed. Finally, if I've learned anything in my time building affordable housing and being on this committee, is that the victims of the current housing crisis are not affluent white homeowners like myself, but those people who are houseless, who are displaced from their homes and neighborhoods by gentrification, who are from marginalized communities and communities of color whose voices are rarely heard. Housing is a human right, and I thank you for giving me this time.
Thanks, Jillian. You speak perfectly to, I think, a segue to introduce Tanisha. Tanisha has come through the process and is a new homeowner. We celebrate that with you, Tanisha. Congratulations. Please share.
Can you hear me well? I just want to
Yes.
make sure. Okay, perfect. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I am a recipient of the Northeast Portland Pal Grant. And my journey to homeownership was difficult, challenging, but it has been so rewarding. I moved to Portland in the 4th grade. My mother was heavily addicted to drugs, which led to a lot of housing instability. I'm the oldest of 4. We moved around a lot. My mother was not clean for more than a year. So we would be displaced in different areas, and it was extremely challenging. By 20, I had custody of all of them. And the one thing I could think about is how to create stability, how to break these cycles of poverty, domestic violence, and drugs that have run through my family. So I joined the military, and it gave me so many resources. It taught me so many things. I learned discipline, I got stability, all of those things. I moved back to Portland in 2012. And it seems like I kind of took a series of losses. Following it immediately, I got a divorce pretty young. I took a pay cut, and that led to me filing bankruptcy. I also got remarried. The marriage had a lot of domestic violence in it, and I finally left in 2019. And what I do know is that the hardest lessons come with the biggest blessings. So while I couldn't see it at the time, I was laying the foundation to get me to where I am now. During the bankruptcy, I had to learn a lot about financial education, which I did not know. No one ever taught me. It's not something you learn in school. And I know for a fact that poverty is generational. It continues to go from child to child. Sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit. Coming back to it. So I moved back to Portland in 2012. And I think around 2013, 2014, I had saw something, I don't know if it was online, but it was talking about applying for a grant to help residents stay in Northeast Portland. I didn't hear anything for a while. I had kind of forgotten about it. Again, like I said, in that meantime, I had filed bankruptcy. I got hooked up with the Portland Housing Center, and Shalonda Menifee is the first person that I worked with. I was fortunate enough to, and I mean, I was a participant for a very long time, so we know each other well. I purchased my home in 2021, I'm sorry, and I had joined in 2015. So when I joined, I hadn't filed bankruptcy yet. She had seen my growth through so many things. And that time, I researched everything. Growing up with my mother, I always felt like people knew more than I knew. So I just really put my head down and learned everything that I could. My credit score went from 542 to 715 when I got approved for my loan. I was debt free. It was just a really great, amazing feeling. My kids went on this journey with me. I have a 14 and a 13-year-old. And at one point, one of their teachers, my son's teacher, came to me and told me how they were teaching this class on finance. And she was so impressed that my son knew all these answers. She was just like, oh my God. And I was really proud. That was such a moment for me to say, wow, right? That's how I broke that curse to poverty, because now they have the education. Information is key, knowledge is power. And I constantly say that lifelong learning is amazing. And to that point, my kids have really, really had that foundation. So going back to it, I got approved for everything in 2019. I even got approved early with my bankruptcy by the VA loan, was house hunting. I was so excited. Everything was great. My family and I went to Disneyland, where my second marriage fell apart. I came home and it was like a collection hit my credit and everything was done for me. Then COVID hit and it was really like, oh my God, I started to feel extremely defeated. Again, I do know that I couldn't see it, but I really was laying the groundwork for that. So and then everything happened extremely quickly. 2021, the collection had been removed from my account. And I just randomly saw it on April 1st. I wrote to Shalonda. I said, homegirl, look at this. Everything is perfect. And she was like, okay, go apply. April 1st, I applied and got approved for a loan. April 2nd, I reached out to 3 real estate agents. Alyssa was who wrote me back on a Friday at 7. We emailed for like 4 hours. It clicked. Everything about that fell into place. We saw the first house April 3rd. By April 8th, I had found my house. I had only saw 4. Put an offer in. By April 9th, it was accepted. By May 26th, I was getting the keys to my house. I doubted it until it happened. I didn't get excited. Everything had kind of fallen apart. So when it did happen, it was a very, very proud moment for me and my children. And in that year, I had a ton of unfinished projects because now I'm a homeowner. I haven't painted everything. I know my way around the drill. I've found some new passions such as gardening and woodworking. I didn't know, but getting the homeownership really showed me those things. I've watched my equity rise. Me and my children continue to learn financial education. Everything I wanted, I pretty much got. I live in historical Vanport. There's so many wonderful things that have happened in this time. I got to work with a team of all women, which was really, really great. It happened the way it was supposed to happen in that divine timing. And no matter how much I tried to force it before, it fell into place as it should have. The grant enabled me to be able to do that. I'm a disabled veteran on a fixed income. So had I not had the grant, I definitely would not have been able to qualify for anything in North or Northeast Portland. It was discouraging. It's discouraging now to look at home prices. I was even able to get historically low interest rates. So that was amazing too. I love North and Northeast Portland. It was the community that we lived in growing up that was so supportive and a sanctuary for us while my mother was in and out of rehab. We were entrenched in the Miracles community. So to be back where I had such an instability in my childhood and to gain housing and change that for myself and my children has been wonderful. So the grant has meant everything to me. It has changed the trajectory of not only my life, but my children's as well. And that's how I got here. Thank you so much for your time and letting me share.
Tanisha, that's amazing. And phenomenal. You perfectly speak to why this process and this commitment is so valuable. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for sticking with the process.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to just say as we wrap this presentation up. Before I give my closing thoughts, I want to give thanks to Dr. Lisa Bates, who is no longer on the Oversight Committee, for her time and commitment. I also want to thank Marlon Holmes for his exemplary service in the housing strategy. He volunteered in many of the subcommittees. Now, while we celebrate what we've accomplished, we also acknowledge that the ground that's been gained still keeps us behind. We cannot relax. This work has to continue. The demand far outweighs the availability of funds and land. We've already talked about how many people applied. We've already talked about the great need. We know this. So we must consider how to address the distance of supply and demand. We have to consider how to leverage other possibilities, such as bank foreclosures, zombie homes, private-public partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. Tough times call for tough people. Tanisha is an example of that. She was tough enough to stick it out. So we have the intelligence, we have the creativity to solve our own issues. The information in this report demonstrates that with a shoestring budget, we can do amazing things. Let's get beyond the shoestring and let's continue to invest and invest significantly for what the future holds. I say this all the time, the promises we've made have to become the promises that we keep. City leadership, we're looking to you. We're looking to you to help guide this process and be invested in it. That's the report for this year. We're open to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. Colleagues, questions for any member of the committee? Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Tanisha. First, let me just say thank you to everyone who presented. I did thoroughly review the report before today, and some good work has certainly been done. But I can't help but have a heavy heart when I realize that home ownership is becoming less and less optional for so many people in our community. And so why I can applaud the incredible work that we've done with the limited resources we had. This is just becoming something that's just out of reach for 90% of the people in Portland today. So thank you for your work. But Tanisha talked about joining the military, but she did not share what branch of the military she served in. Would you mind telling me what branch you served, Tanisha?
The best branch, the Air Force. We get really picky
I
about
don't know
that.
if that I would say.
Oh,
that
here we go. Here we go.
Tanisha, let me just tell you a really quick story. I was rejected by the Air Force because I was 5 pounds under their minimum weight. But luckily, the Navy was not as discriminatory as the Air Force was. And they took
No, I love the Navy. I'm not going to lie.
Congratulations on your service. Thank you for your service. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. It is a story repeated over and over and over again. But you have what it took to get to now be able to stand here proudly and say you are a homeowner. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Keelan, do we have
one more? Sorry, Mayor.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Dr. Holt, I would really like to dig into some of this data in a more appropriate time, because there are some things that pop out at me, like the number of Black families that get grants versus loans as compared to white families. I want to learn more about why that spike is so significant. And I also want to learn more about why African Americans are not getting the contracts to build homes for African Americans. I want to know a little bit more about that. But overall, I just want to applaud today the incredible good work that's been done. And so I'll have my office reach out so that we can get more information to dig into this report in more detail.
I look forward to it, Commissioner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Commissioner Ryan.
I'll make some closing remarks later, and I just want to thank everyone for being here. I want to go back to looking at the data that you presented, Leslie. It was really well done. I did have one question I think the public would like to hear. The outreach and the inclusion of the Latino community was much lower than I would have expected. Can you explain perhaps why that is?
For which data point, Commissioner?
Not obviously for the construction part. It's for those that are utilizing the home loans and getting into housing through the Northeast. It was on one of the slides that you presented.
Can I respond first, Leslie?
Of course you can. I just want to make sure the public can understand.
Absolutely.
Sure, thanks.
I appreciate that. We targeted and addressed the community that's outlined in the search. And that community was historically the African American community. That's historic albino. That is where African Americans were kept or allowed to live. If you know anything about redlining, if you know about the racist practices of the city, if you know about the activities of banking, see, the African Americans lived there and were then displaced from there and or marginalized from there. And so that is the community that was targeted. While the preference policy does not identify a racial bias, it is an opportunity for the most negatively impacted people in this city and state, and that's Black people. So that's my answer to that.
No, thank you, Dr. Holt. I realize this is a restorative justice action, and I really did want you to explain that on the public record to everyone. It's just that because the data was kind of stark there, and I thought it deserved more dialogue. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Absolutely.
All right, colleagues, if there are no more questions, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Ryan moves, Commissioner Hardesty seconds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll, Keelan.
Ryan,
Yes, first of all, thank you all for being here. It was a real treat in general. And I want to thank you, Leslie Goodlow for getting us started. You were really adept to just jumping in there, and truly the report was so thorough and the presentation was really clear, and it's exactly the good government when we behave like that. So I really appreciate that report. Also, I'm glad you mentioned the Kaiser Permanente gift. That's a really big deal, really big deed for our city. So thank you, Kaiser Permanente. And Dr. Holt, once again, your leadership is stellar. And thank you, Jillian, for your storytelling. It's just so great to see the progress. It takes a few years to build a system. And what I noticed is how it's really accelerated the last few years, which is common when you're building something. So anyway, I like the fact that family homes were 83% of the percentage of 3 or more bedrooms. I thought that was a very important point, and a very important data point to bring up. And I have to say, the personal stories, I know, Leslie, when you mentioned your childhood friend, and then Dr. Holt, you repeated several times, promises made, promises kept. That's a great way to keep us accountable. And as someone that's lived in Portland most of my life, and only have lived in North and Northeast Portland, I wasn't surprised to hear Dr. Holt saying that people truly want to live in North and Northeast Portland. And Jillian, you did say something really that I wanted to reflect on, and that's few things are worth doing that are easy. It's like the biggest understatement I've ever experienced since I've been in office and doing community work prior to this. It's you got to be tough, you got to be persistent, and you never can give up. So thank you all for hanging in there. Nisha, your story at the end was really, I think, all that we really did need to hear. I think people do learn from personal stories, and your vulnerability and your willingness to tell your story. It was just very compelling. It's powerful. And you said the hardest lessons are the biggest blessings. And I know that's been my life experience. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for being your true, authentic, beautiful self. You definitely dropped the mic on why it's necessary for us to stay focused on this. You and your children are home, and we're such a better city because of it. I vote aye.
Artisty.
What a difference a few years make. I remember the very first presentation that you made in front of me in 2019, when we were just getting off the ground and identifying new challenges that were preventing people from having the opportunity to own a home, right? Like the significance of the time it takes to clean up a credit background, the continuing rise in cost of putting down a down payment. And this was, and let me just say that we have come a long way from 2019, and we have had great success. It was an investment of TIF dollars. Those dollars are going away. And so we have to think differently about what happens as we move forward. And so though I am very grateful for all the community care and oversight that this project has enjoyed, I also want to be very mindful that, again, that the dollars were available because of TIF, and those dollars are going away. And so there needs to be a new plan that actually really doesn't take what, it has to be something different. And I don't know what it looks like yet. Nobody's presented a new plan. And so I look forward to working with Commissioner Ryan and the rest of my colleagues to figure out what is that plan moving forward. And it certainly won't be what it was because, again, TIF is done. But I believe in Portlanders and their creativity to think about what's important. I will say, as this housing at 80% still means a family has to have over $74,000 in income. And that is a huge hurdle in the city at this moment. And so I applaud the folks that stuck with it and made it through to the other side and are now homeowners. And I hope we have the ability to continue to make progress so that everyone has the opportunity to prosper here in the city of Portland. Happy to vote aye.
Maps.
I'd like to thank Tanisha, Jillian, Dr. Holt, and everyone else who testified today. Your testimony was powerful. I'd also like to congratulate Commissioner Ryan, the North and Northeast Neighborhood Housing Strategy Oversight Committee, the Housing Bureau, and Leslie for a job well done. I vote aye.
Rubio.
Thank you to Leslie, Dr. Holt, and Jillian for the great presentation, and also the rest of the committee for their participation and service. And Tanisha, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey to home ownership with us today as well. It really drove the point of why we're all doing this home for us. And that was important for us to hear. The outcomes demonstrate that community-centered policy is working. And having that clear lens and data of the impact of our investments is really important, but it's equally important to recognize where we still need to go. And the housing continuum covers so many areas of stability for Portlanders, and it's under-resourced, and thus we're constantly faced with all these difficult choices. But that's why bodies like these are so important, and that's why I'm appreciative of the leadership and vision of the community members that are helping to guide and implement these investments. The strategies and the goals outlined are making a critical difference for Portlanders in terms of home stabilization, but also in creating generational wealth, which is where we need to be focusing on in these communities. And this is how movement forward happens. So thank you for the great work, and I'm very happy to accept this report. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
First of all, Dr. Holt, I want to thank you personally. It's great to be here today and see strong positive results, forward momentum, and it makes us all look good. And I appreciate that. But I also want to remember where you've been and acknowledge that sometime shortly after I took over as mayor, I heard my first presentation on the North-Northeast housing strategy. And my recollection was words like debacle were used to describe that initial presentation. It didn't go as well as I think we'd hoped in the early years. And I know Commissioner Saltzman had worked very, very hard on it, and the Housing Bureau had worked very hard on it, and you and others had worked very hard on it. But laying the foundation for this project was extremely complicated because it was new territory. It was new territory for everyone. And you took some heat back then. And I don't want to flee from that history. I want to remember where we've been and the sacrifices that you personally made and the criticism that you took at that time. And you could have done one of two things at that point in history. Maybe if you'd been smarter, you just would have quit. You would have walked away. But you didn't, because as you stated at the time, there were values at stake and there was conviction behind the action that you wished to take. And I just want to say that history has validated your faith in this project, in the people who you are working with on this project, and in the, I'm looking for the right word, and I'm trying not to use righteousness, but the importance of the values that you espoused at that time. It's always great to look back and declare everything a success, but I also just want to remember that there was some trauma along the way that got us to where we are today. And you deserve personal credit for your leadership of this effort. And I want to make sure you get it. So that's sort of my first point. You deserve it. Thank you for your great leadership. I also want to thank everybody who has served on this team and worked so hard on this over the years, from the Housing Bureau, our citizens who are so engaged in this process, who are seeking to make our community a better place for everyone. Thank you for continuing to believe in this project and the importance of it. And as has always been said from the beginning, it's not just the absolute numbers here. Look, in absolute numbers, we're not addressing the totality of the problem. Everybody knows it. But the value and the symbolism and the importance of what is at stake here is unmistakable for our community and many people in our community. And you have made that crystal clear for this council, as well as the councils that will undoubtedly follow us. Last but not least, Tanisha, you are a courageous, awesome person. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing a difficult story, but an important story. You are not alone, as I'm sure you are aware, and you speak for many who will hear your voice and your story and feel courage vicariously through you. Thank you for being here and sharing the story, and again, underscoring the importance of this great effort. I vote aye, and the report is accepted, and I look forward to continued progress in the years ahead. Thank you all. Next item. Let's see, I think we're good to go. Yes, we're good to go on the next time certain item. Please, 291, please, Keelan.
Authorize grant funds for the East Portland Action Plan 2022 Special Appropriations Grant Program for $150,000 to improve livability and increase civic engagement in East Portland.
I want to begin by welcoming 3 members of the East Portland Action Plan Grants team. J.R. Lilly, EPAP advocate, as well as Bobby Mbasu and Robert Schultz, who are EPAP grant co-chairs. Today, they're going to share their recommendations to allocate $150,000 in grants to organizations in East Portland that are working very, very hard to improve livability and to prevent displacement, to encourage people to be civically engaged, to partner with government agencies that can be allies, or provide essential services that the community desperately needs. But before we kick off this presentation, I'd also like to turn this over to the co-sponsor, Commissioner Hardesty, to present whatever remarks she'd like to make up front here. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that beautiful introduction to EPAP. It is the East Portland Action Plan, because we know how we love acronyms here at City Hall. The East Portland Action Plan came about over 12 years ago because community members did not feel heard by elected leaders in the city, the county, and it was important for community members to come together and decide what they wanted the city to focus on. I was proud to be a proud member of EPAP up until the day I took office, and I am extremely proud at the great work that J.R. Lilly has done since taking over as advocate for EPAP. Let me say that EPAP members are volunteer community members who care passionately about East Portland and about East Portland getting its fair share of revenue. One of the reasons EPAP was formed was because once we did the analysis, we realized that the biggest government service we received was policing services. And the community thought we deserved more. We deserve the transportation infrastructure. We deserve to have investments in our infrastructure. We deserved a lot more in services from our government. EPAP has been an organized voice for the diverse community of East Portland, and I will say at sometimes the only voices representing the community members who live, work, and worship in East Portland. I am proud of the work they continue to do. I am thrilled that with them starting their strategic planning process to ensure that they continue to be a strong voice for East Portland residents. So at this note, I will turn it over to J.R. Lilly, who will help us get through our presentation. Thanks for being here, everyone. And I believe that Commissioner Sharon Marin is also here to speak on behalf, but she's probably not part of the panel. I just saw her a note in chat. Thank you. Take it away, JR.
Wonderful. Yat bene, she Lily in the touchy ni nishle, Central Canada Bashichin, touchy ni Dashachedoa, Tabahan Dashnella. For those who don't speak Navajo, good morning. My name is J.R. Lilly. I am part of the Red Runnings Water people, born for the Cliff Dwelling people. My mother's part of the Red Runnings Water people as well. My father's father is part of the Edgewater people. Pronouns are he, him, his, and I have the wonderful opportunity of being the East Portland Action Plan advocate. Thank you both, Commissioner Hardesty and Mayor Wheeler. Both have been very instrumental in helping us continue the work we're advocating in East Portland. So today, I want to thank you everyone for allowing us to share today about our grants program. The EPAP is a community-led committee that advocates for strategic investments to improve the lives of the neighborhoods, the 13 neighborhoods in East Portland. Like other organizations, the impact of a global pandemic has shown the need to evolve with the times to better serve our community, which we're making those updates with a strategic plan update. However, despite the pandemic, our grants program remains strong and it's working to continue to meet the many needs of our East Portland neighbors. Today, we're asking for your approval for our 2022 grant recommendations. This will include 10 projects for our civic engagement grants, which is $55,600, 10 projects for our general grants, $50,100, and currently 7 projects with our community support fund, with more to come at $15,000. We currently have 2 other grants, our partnership grant and a second round of our community support fund, which will spend out the rest of that $150,000 to those projects, but we're asking for the current project listed in your packet today. Each year, the East Portland Action Plan gives away half of our budget to support organizations who are working in their own way on the 268 action items in our plan. And now I'm going to introduce our grant co-chairs. First, we're going to have Bobby come and share a little bit. Then we're going to have a video presentation, and then we'll pass it over to Schultz. Thank you very much, Bobby.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. So I am a resident of East Portland, chose to move to East Portland, which not everybody chooses. As we all know, there's a lot of displacement originally to East Portland and then from East Portland, which is part of what we cover in our EPAP items of things that we would like to stop the displacement. So I want to give you a brief update on the grants program. This year, we finally finished our reviewing all of our grants and revising all of our application processes. The last one we had to tackle was what we used to call the municipal partnership grant. We now call it the partnership grant because many people thought that the only government agency that they could partner with was the city government, which was not true. It could be any government agency. So it's now just called a partnership grant, and that's one that will be hopefully coming forth later. The grants committee used to meet just during the grant cycle. Well, pretty much now our grant cycle is all year round. We always seem to have a grant out there. So we now meet monthly. And in addition, we have special sessions meetings where we score the grants. So that piece is out there as well. And we hold open meetings. Anybody can come in. We enjoy getting feedback from community members. And if they want to come to our meeting, that's great. We like to have them there. We also can always use people on our committee because the amount of time it takes to score grants is phenomenal. I just did a brief thing, and I figure the minimum that our scorers have put in so far this year is probably 25 hours each. And that's probably the minimum because many people probably put in more than that. It depends on how fast you score, I would suppose. We have a community support process. One of the things that we've done is to make our application easier to read and to understand so that there are fewer questions. We hold community support meetings so that those applying for grants can get their questions answered, because many of our applicants have never applied for a grant before, don't have professional grant writers, and we feel it's important to make sure that they have access. We also allow our grants to be submitted in any language which they prefer, and we'll then have the grants translated for those of us. I personally don't read Arabic, so I was really glad that they translated their grant so I could read it. We know that the grants, the needs are great for our grants. It's been extremely difficult during the pandemic. You can't always plan for when you're going to have or if you're going to be able to do things. Our applicants have been very resilient, I'll have to say, and have the last few, this particular year, I've noticed that in the grant applications, they have even put in, if we can't do this in person, we will do this. So they are, really thinking ahead about what they will or won't be able to do. And I think that's great. And it was that great need by our communities, especially during the pandemic, that led to the creation of Community Support Fund. There were a lot of small things that needed to be done to support all our various communities. And I bet you JR has some kind of idea of how many different communities we have out here, but I'm going to say 30 would probably be a minimum, because it seems we have a lot of different communities out here, and they all have their own needs and need to approach their communities in their own ways. And that's what the Community Support Grant actually does. And initially, a lot of it was around the pandemic, but now it's broadened. It's not just pandemic related things that they can get monies for. And we have, as JR said, we have a number of things that we brought forth today. That's as brief as I can make that update. I'd like to share two of our grants with you that I'm really excited about. I like all of our grants. We wouldn't be supporting them if we didn't like them. But one of them that I wanted to bring forward was the EPEP General Grant for the Black Youth Interactive Mentorship Project, which is being done by Black Men in Training. It's a great idea, and it's not just mentoring, it's also training. So they're not just mentoring the programs, the Black youth, which is important in and of itself, but they're also training them to how to become civically engaged within their communities and within the broader Portland area, which I think is really important. A lot of time, mentorship programs are good, but they don't move that extra step to how do I now that I have the self-esteem that I need and I have the support I need in order to move forward, how do I do that? And this particular program is actually going to take them on site to programs, and perhaps they'll end up here at City Council, hopefully. But so that they can experience different ways for them to civically engage in our community, which I think is a really important thing to do. Another one of the grants is one of our civic engagement grants, and it deals with a problem that we all know exists here in Portland, and that's domestic violence. And domestic violence has no culture for which it is, no culture is exempt, it seems, from domestic violence. And yet when you have a distrust, perhaps because of where you came from, or your culture itself doesn't want to talk about it, it's not acceptable to talk about it, it can be very challenging to try to deal with all the domestic violence. So one of the groups out here in Portland who have done a lot of projects is the Aleph Bar Arabic Culture Education Group. They've done a lot with education, teaching kids how to speak Arabic. They have developed a program that is mostly for the Arabic community. And they are going to be teaching this in Arabic. They're going to have an Arabic instructor, a trainer, to talk to them about what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, how to access services, other ways to cope when you have domestic violence in your home, so that you can have a better relationship both within your community and can communicate and access those things that are not specifically in your community. And I think that is a great program, is coming together, and I believe that we have a video from this particular group. So I think it's time to play the video.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I am a certified advocate in domestic violence. I'm working in this field since 4 years now, bilingual in Arabic and English. In this workshop, we are talking about the domestic violence. We will targeting the Arabic community especially, and we are trying to serve different categories in the community to educate them about the domestic violence and how that affects their relationships between the families and the relationship between the partners. I will try to define the domestic violence and how many kinds of domestic violence.
Okay, JR?
Sounds wonderful.
Excellent. Mr. Schultz, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me okay? Super duper. So good morning, council members. I am Schultz, full-time single father to 3 amazing youth living in the Lentz neighborhood, Southeast Portland. Been involved in EPAP for quite some time. Love the volunteering within the grants committee as co-chair with Bobby and with an amazing group of other volunteers. We've definitely made the changes that Bobby alluded to with our grants program to make it so that if you've never done a grant before, you have the ability to negotiate a system that will end with funds or at least feedback with education. We definitely changed it from a seasonal kind of scramble to a more year-round stride, if you will. We have 3 categories, as mentioned: civic engagement to further community involvement of people not usually included in decision-making. It's a big element that you see often reflected in the groups, our grantees, that you don't see anywhere else. We have our general grant to improve livability and prevent displacement. Although I'll challenge you guys that livability has now become kind of a very subjective, weaponized term. And really what we've chatted about in EPAP is that we want the lived experience for all members of our communities to be increased. And you see that again reflected in our grants. The Community Support Fund is really about the needs of the community members. And as Bobby mentioned, it is a response to things seen with COVID, the impacts of COVID. It's also, so EPAP does this 150,000 each year, and we rarely have any carryover, and that's because we're constantly striving for ways to put that money into our community. The Community Support Fund was also an answer to that. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, people have great ideas. They apply through the process, and sometimes, occasionally, they can't deliver. Well, then those funds get reverted back, and the way we handle that is it's in the Community Support Fund. So it's not lost. It's not put in the next budget cycle. It's put right back in the community. For me today, I was going to talk about 3 that I liked. You know, we all go through this process. We review, you know, many grants, and then we find the ones we're like, wait, I really like this one. I really like that one. I think the best reflections of what EPAP does with this grant money can be summarized with the Slavic Festival, with the Jim Pepper Native Arts Festival, and then another one that I'll mention with the Jim Pepper Native Arts Festival. Jim Pepper was a Caw Creek musician, and the festival really inspires Indigenous musicians and has spun off into culturally relevant music education through their Speak Sing Native program. I'm not in that community, so I can't speak to it definitively, but I know that it's an excellent program that's gaining more and more traction and worth being aware of. The Slavic Festival this year, I think, is even more important as we see regional conflicts and we see expats that are here suffering some of the impacts. I was recently heard a story of a Chinese food restaurant that had somebody walk in and say, we're not going to buy food from you anymore because China supports Russia's efforts. And so those conflicts, though they're international, they definitely have roots back. And so then local events like the Slavic Festival really help bridge that gap and support the community members that are here. I think it's very important. The other one that I wanted to kind of draw attention to was outdoor access. It's listed under our general grants. They are doing one-on-one and group outings into the natural spaces in East Portland with East Portland residents. Of course, that one speaks specifically to me as I have two sons that just recently completed their Eagle rank in scouting. That is largely outdoor. Our unit has over 65 youth. I literally last night was teaching over 25 kids the proper care and safety use of knives, axes, and hatchets and saws, bow saws. Man, bow saws different than a saw. But at any rate, I won't get into that. These are lessons they don't get at home, or they get at home and they need that reinforcement of coming together as community. These same elements of learned at home, learned from community apply to the Slavic festival, the Jim Pepper festival, the Somali, the Arabic, the Rohingya, which I apologize if I said that wrong, the Lumin, that are all present in this grants package. They're all asking for empowerment for them to service their own community, which I think is so incredibly important and such a vital element that differs from a lot of other grant programs. While we see comments like Dr. Holt that talks about a shoestring budget on a larger scale, we also see the very same operational issues with small scale groups trying to build capacity to support their very own communities. And they are working as well with shoestring budgets, but they don't necessarily have the support and the optics of a larger platform like Dr. Holt has worked so tirelessly for, right? Having advocates that can travel the distance, as mentioned by the mayor, like that's a long walk, a long run, a long drudgerous journey. And we have that in our communities every day. And we see that reflected in these grants programs. If I was going to wish for something, it would be that the city would copy and more implement our form of grant processing, where we have community members speaking to the needs of our community, reviewing the grants with that focus. Is it always clean and perfect? No, it's a bunch of community members in a room. Come on, we all know how that goes. But does it yield excellent results? I think this grants package certainly illustrates that it does yield excellent results for our community, directed by our community, supported by our community, and through you guys with the money, right? You guys are the money, you guys are the policy, you guys are who we need to help us move it forward. As mentioned, the budget for EPAP was, I believe, $327,000 a year. We could use that just in grants. We go through 150 without an issue. So we are dedicatedly, easily able to find groups to give money to for themselves and improve the lived experience of East Portlanders. As we recover from COVID and as we venture out, having events like the Jim Pepper and the Slavic to go to kind of reacquaint ourselves with is very important. I don't want to take too much more time here, but I'll leave with this. Our scout troop did our first summer camp. We hosted it ourselves. We had 56 kids. And it's 5 days. The first 3 days, the first 2 days, exciting, exuberant, yay. The third day, crash. Everybody was crashing because they had not had 2 years of being with people and being with people a lot. And then the fourth and fifth day were great. They kind of recovered. We talked, we counseled, we coached. We did the job that adult mentors and leaders do. And that is needed all across our systems. We hear it in our schools, and we hear it in our community and their want and their ask and their desire for these grants. And I appreciate that I've kind of drifted off. I know I'm supposed to be like selling EPAP, but this is EPAP to me. This is our grants to me. This is the connection to our community that is so vital. I wish for a better path to city leaders to give the ideas that we hear that could help our communities. I wish that there was more that we could do. I and Bobby, as she mentioned, we put in a lot of time. She was talking about our volunteers doing 25 hours, and I would hazard that Bobby and I do quite a bit more than that. When you're in that leader position, you guys know how this works. You field all the questions and the emails, et cetera. It is.
Mr. Schultz, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, please, because we have a very detailed agenda today. If you want to finish that last thought so that we can watch the video and move on with the agenda. I could listen to you all day, but we have a full agenda.
Your timing is impeccable because I was literally on my last sentence, so I appreciate that. We're on the same time frame. It is with that idea that we have these grants. I hope it's unanimously supported, and I hope you guys take a chance and visit some of our meetings. We're always open for input, participation from any of the community that happens to be watching, and from any commissioners, of course. Thank you guys for letting me talk.
Let me just say, Mr. Schultz, that your enthusiasm is contagious. So I really appreciate you being here today. And now we're going to ask if we could watch the short video, please.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I am a certified advocate in domestic violence. I'm working in this field since 4 years now, bilingual in Arabic and English. In this workshop, we are talking about the domestic violence. We will targeting the Arabic community especially, and we are trying to serve different categories in the community to educate them about the domestic violence and how that affects their relationships between the families and the relationship between the partners. I will try to define the domestic violence and how many kinds of domestic violence are there, how to stay safe in this situation, and who to contact to get services and support. Is it safe to call the police or is it not? We will try to listen to the audience, open discussions about the problems that the community face. This presentation will be in the situation to let the audience participate as much as we can because we try to listen to them more, to know what's their problems and what they can't talk about. Because talking about domestic violence in the Arabic community is a very sensitive, I think because of the traditions and all that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, EPAP, for your presentation. Mayor, I'll turn the program back over to you.
All right, very good. Colleagues, any further questions on this? And Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this emergency ordinance?
No one signed up.
All right, very good. Why don't we go ahead and call the roll, please?
Ryan?
Yes. Oh, darn it. Sorry about that. I had a technical difficulty moment, like the video. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioner Hardesty, for bringing this forward. And it's always good to see you, Community Advocate J.R. Lilly. Bobby, I really like the name change as we want our investments to leverage more investments from other communities, from philanthropic sector and such. And thank you for also acknowledging the time that you put in. I did notice that Schultz was nodding rather vigorously when you said 25 hours. So I was clear that it was probably more than that. And I like that you mentioned that you're into a year-round stride. So you're definitely building capacity. So thank you both for your public service, the two of you. And I also just thank you for bringing more life to the work with your storytelling. And we learned so much from your stories. And I'm also really grateful the video was played. It was really compelling to hear the story, the domestic violence story that was told. Again, thank you for bringing this ordinance forward, which incorporates the community-driven East Portland Action Plan, and definitely here's to the results. I vote aye.
Hardesty?
Thank you so much, J.R. Lilly, for your leadership of EPAP. Thank you, Schultz and Bobby. Bobby, you were doing grants when I was doing grants. So clearly Bobby loves doing grants because we spent a lot of time doing that. I am so proud of the work that EPAP does. You work with some of the newer emerging organizations that will never, as you said very eloquently, never hope to get dollars from government. And you're able to help them do an application process that makes them competitive and gives them the opportunity to invest in their own communities and invest in civic engagement as they see fit. I have always been proud of EPAP, and I continue to be proud of EPAP, and I'm very happy to have EPAP in my portfolio right now. And I will say that the grants that you selected are awesome. But I want to say also that my hat is off to the volunteers of EPAP, because I know you saved many lives at the height of COVID with your mutual aid, with you making sure you're checking in on our elders and seniors. I see you, and I know the work that you did with almost no resources to make it happen. But you did it because out of love for the community that we live in. I love East Portland. And like Bobby, I moved here because I wanted to, not because I was forced to move here. And East Portland is my home. And you all make me proud to be an East Portlander. I am very happy to vote aye.
That's
I'd like to thank the mayor and Commissioner Hardesty for bringing this item forward. I'd also like to thank JR, Bobby, and Schultz for your dynamic presentations today. I know EPAP well. I used to attend the meetings on a regular basis, and I really appreciate the work that EPAP does. And I'm also familiar with many of the organizations that are funded in this round of grant cycles, and I'm excited about them too. Schultz does a much better job at emoting than I do, but Division Midway, the Jim Pepper Fest, Historic Park Rose Community Develop, East Portland Neighbors, Black Men in Training, Rosewood, Slavic Community Center. These are great grassroots organizations that have been making a difference in the community for a long, long time. So thanks to everyone who helped provide some support for them. I'm excited to both attend some of the events that will be coming up thanks to the dollars that you're getting out in the community. And I am delighted to vote aye this morning. I vote aye.
Mia.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Hardesty and JR for bringing this great group of grant recipients forward for our approval. Again, thank you to Schultz and Bobby and many of the volunteers who put in so many hours to get here. Our city and our community owes a debt of gratitude to you. I also had the honor of working in the past, in my former life, with a few organizations on the list throughout my time in the community and at the city. And I'm so impressed by this community-centered work. I'm also very appreciative of the work of the East Portland Action Plan to keep council accountable and also committed to making progress for our East Portland neighbors. So congratulations, everyone, and thank you for your work. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I am at a place in my life where I start asking questions like, was it worth it? And I think that about a lot of the work that we do here. And I think it's more than a coincidence today. It's the universe working in the way the universe works, that we just had the Northeast housing strategy come forward right before we had this EPAP grant proposal come before us. And both of them started in a place of community need. And colleagues, there is a familiar story about East Portland not getting the attention or the time or the resources that it deserves. And there's no question that downtown gets the lion's share of attention. That's the center of our city's economy. It's where our large employers are located. It's the hub of travel and tourism and convention business. So yes, downtown does get a lion's share of the business, but we can never lose sight of the fact that the majority of the people in this city live east of the river. That's where people live who call themselves Portlanders. And so the needs of people in East Portland are paramount to the work of this council. And it's ever been so. One of the historical footnotes to the East Portland Action Plan that I always enjoy is I was there at the beginning. I was there when Mayor Potter and then House Speaker, now United States Senator Jeff Merkley, and me in my capacity as the county chair became the government sponsors of a community-driven plan to start working collectively on the east side of the river to drive City Hall and the state and Multnomah County government towards a more collaborative relationship with where our people live and the needs that they have in their community. And it started off rather modestly. And it's been fun for me to watch over the years because I have not been personally engaged in EPAP except, occasionally being asked to come and speak and share my thoughts and perspectives and the work we're doing. But it's taken on a life of its own under the leadership of people who live here, who care deeply about the community and they care deeply about the future. And I look back on some of the bumps and the grinds early on, and I can say now with the benefit of, I don't know how many years it's been, 12, 13, 14, 15 years. 12, thank you, Commissioner, since that first set of meetings, I can say it was worth it. It was absolutely worth the blood, the sweat, and the tears. And it's still worth it. And I'm really impressed when I hear, the hours people are putting in. The last 2 years, the media has been asking, is Portland dead? When you have people who are taking time out of their day and away from their families and away from their jobs, and they're dedicating it in the hours that these individuals are dedicating it, Portland is a long damn way from dead because the people of this city are going to ensure that it's not. And that's what I love about EPAP. It's got a spirit to it. And Schultz, you sort of embody that spirit. I love it. And by the way, one Eagle Scout to 2 others, please congratulate your kids on my behalf and tell them I'm really proud of them. It's really, really hard to, with all the different activities and all the pressures on kids today, to be able to make that commitment and earn that Eagle Award. That really is something, and it lasts a lifetime. So please pass on to them. The mayor is super proud of them for the hard work that they put into that. At any rate, I digress. The more important thing is this is about people bringing grants forward to identify the needs that they see in their community. We as a council are being responsive to that. Colleagues, I'm glad to see that we're once again being responsive to what EPAP asks us to do. It's easy to do the right thing. I vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. Thank you all for your hard work, and we're going to look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Next up, this one's a good one, a proclamation 292, please.
Proclaim April 26th, 2022 to be Frederick Law Olmsted Day.
Commissioner Rubio.
She may be frozen, Mayor.
Yeah, let's see if she comes back. Oops, or maybe not.
And here in Portland, we experience his influence through our own parkway, and natural area system, which is based on a 1903 plan by his son, John Charles Olmsted. Today, we have 3 speakers involved in the local Olmsted 200 celebration. Suzanne Reinhardt Bishop, who will speak about Olmsted's design principles and their influence on progressive social change. Mike Haupt, who will speak about the place of natural resources in Olmsted's work. And Jim Shalin, who will speak about non-motorized trails within the 1903 Parks Plan, and specifically the 40-mile loop. So I'll start by turning it over to Suzanne. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio, and good morning, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. I'm Suzanne Bishop, a member of the Portland Parks Foundation Board and a vice chair of the Garden History and Design Committee at the Garden Club of America. Next Tuesday, April 26th, marks the 200th anniversary of the birth of Frederick Law Olmsted Sr., a leading thinker in the early 20th century progressive movement. This year, across the nation, public and private organizations at the local and national level are participating in an Olmsted 200 celebration. Through events, education, and advocacy, this effort will ensure Olmsted's legacy lives on by renewing our public and policy commitments to the preservation and maintenance of our historic parks and places along with the thoughtful procurement of additional landscapes for the public's well-being. Prior to Central Park in New York City, there were no public parks in America. All our natural spaces and wilderness were available for private ownership. There was no place in rapidly growing American cities for people to enjoy green spaces and clean air. Frederick Law Olmsted brought half a lifetime of progressive public work to bear on this problem. As an author, journalist, abolitionist, civic servant, a city planner, and a leader in the profession of American landscape architecture, Olmsted was prescient in his understanding of the profound connection between people and nature, and he promoted the importance of regular and easy access to nature as being vital to people's physical and mental health. Olmsted advocated for public ownership of urban green spaces and rural natural areas, and for universal access to these places. Olmsted bequeathed a set of design principles that has served as a blueprint for the arrangement of land, water, plants, buildings, and parkways for artistic scenic effects that were devised to serve the health and social needs of all Americans. And Olmsted showed that thoughtful landscape design would promote community, advance democracy, provide recreational opportunities in urban environments, nurture and invigorate public health, and encourage the development of livable communities. Olmsted designed urban parks in an idealized version of nature to stimulate our senses. His social theories argued for accessible urban public parks to benefit our physical and mental health, and as places in which to practice democracy together. These were revolutionary ideas at the time, but now are ingrained in our way of thinking. The thousands of city parks, urban projects, and state and federal parks he, his sons, and his partners created across the country designed for us a new kind of America that embraces common ground for all people. For this, Olmsted is acknowledged as the first and greatest landscape architect in the American public realm. We would like to invite you all to a symposium on the Olmsted's continuing legacy in Portland next Tuesday at 12:30 at the Peninsula Park Community Center. This symposium is a collaboration between Portland Parks and Rec, the Friends groups of Terwilliger Parkway, Peninsula Park, and Columbia Park, and the Portland Garden Club. And it features the speakers William Hawkins, Mike Hauk, and Jim Shalin. And now I'll let Mike Hauk share how Frederick Law Olmsted's son, John Charles Olmsted, brought these ideals west and envisioned for us a comprehensive and interconnected park system for early Portland.
Is Mike frozen? Hi, Mike.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, you can go, I think.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to be here. I don't know if you can see anything I'm showing. I've got a copy of Olmsted's 1903 plan, which I intend to deliver to all of you. I read it back in 1982. Barbara Walker introduced me to it, and it inspired me to get involved in issues related to parks in Portland and throughout the region. The plan did call for a comprehensive interconnected system of parks, parkways, and boulevards to be distributed equitably across the city. And by the way, he did point out the disparity of West Side, East Side as far back as 1903 and advocated for really focusing on acquisition of parkland on the east side of the Willamette River. In addition to parkways and boulevards, he advocated for neighborhood parks, playgrounds, city squares, and very importantly for natural landscapes, or what he called scenic reservations. What struck me most about the plan was this call for inclusion of natural landscapes and protection of urban waterways as essential elements of a comprehensive park system. There was one passage that stood out to me the first reading through, and I'll quote, "Formerly, people built with the backs of their houses upon rivers and lakes, thus not only excluding the public from continuous access to them, but ruining their beauty. We should lay out parks and parkways to embrace streams that carry more water that can be taken care of by drain pipes of ordinary size. Thus, brooks and little rivers, which would otherwise become nuisances, to be put in large underground conduits at enormous expense. They may be made the occasion of delightful local pleasure grounds or attractive parkways. So 119 years ago, for what he was advocating 119 years ago for what we refer to today as green infrastructure. He presciently advocated for what Parks and Recreation and the Bureau of Environmental Services have only relatively recently combined their resources to improve watershed health and protect the city's biodiversity and mitigate and adapt to climate change. I'd like to acknowledge, by the way, that Commissioner Nick Fish frequently quoted Olmsted's 1903 plan, and I'm hopeful after I deliver copies to all of you that you will be as enthusiastic about the impact that he's had on the city of Portland. And in fact, Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. and John Charles Olmsted argued that parks were not an amenity. They were essential urban infrastructure. And as you all know, Portland Parks and Recreation actually was declared an infrastructure bureau about, 15 or 20 years ago, appropriately so. Among his many recommendations for protecting the city's natural landscapes, Balch Creek, what became Forest Park, a large watery park in the Columbia Sloughs, and what is now Riverview Natural Area in Southwest Portland, and for Ross Island to come into public ownership. We've got 50 acres on Ross Island now that is owned by Portland Parks and Recreation. I'm hopeful that we can expand that in the not too distant future. So my pitch to you to honor John Charles Olmsted's plan was to ramp up what the city is already investing in green infrastructure. And it's really critical that Portland Parks and Recreation and BES continue their collaboration on those projects. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Jim Shalin, who will talk about how boulevards and parkways has been interpreted in the modern age as the 40-mile loop.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Jim Shalin and a board member with the 40-Mile Loop Land Trust, and I'm here today to mention three things. The first is to thank you, as well as past city administrations, for supporting the 40-mile loop since its inception in the late 1970s. Specifically, thanks to Portland Parks and Recreation and to Portland Bureau of Transportation for their roles in developing and opening a new section of Marine Drive Trail in the Wilkes neighborhood in 2019. And thanks to the same bureaus for submitting multiple grant applications to Metro in February of this year. One for another section of Marine Drive Trail in the Park Rose neighborhood, and two sections of the North Portland Greenway, as well as a grant application for a section of the Columbia Slough Trail near the Portland International Airport. This slide shows you a map of the 150-mile long 40-mile loop compared to a rendition of the original 40-mile loop of parkways and boulevards as envisioned by John Charles Olmsted. And also, I have to say, as interpreted by C.P. Kaiser. C.P. Kaiser was Portland Park Superintendent from 1919 to 1949. And this map on the inset shows you what he was trying to put together in that time. The Olmsted-Kaiser inset shows an ambitious goal of parks and 40 miles of parkways for Portland. The larger portion is the updated version of that that came out of the 40-mile loop master plan that we adopted in 1983, 39 years ago. So you can see the enormous difference in scale of these two ideas that are very similar in their intent. The next slide, please, is a pie graph of progress. After 40 years of work by all of us, the entire 150-mile system that includes the cities of Portland, Gresham, Fairview, Troutdale, and a portion of Milwaukee is now 70% complete. If we include projects that are currently funded, we will be close to 72%. And if we're extremely fortunate and are funded by all current grant proposals submitted by Portland, by Gresham, and by Troutdale, we could be around 75% complete. In closing, the 40 Mile Loop looks forward to continuing the collaboration that has enabled us to achieve these mileposts. The goal of the 40 Mile Loop has always been to provide safe, equitable, and sustainable access to nature and public open spaces for pedestrians and bicyclists. We believe that goal is as relevant today as it was over 40 years ago. Thank you.
So first, I want to just also thank Suzanne and Mike and Jim for their dedication to parks and natural areas and their excellent work in lifting up the Portland significance of this occasion. These remarks help us understand the ways that Frederick Law Olmsted contributed to Portland's nationally known system of parks and natural areas and trails. And Portland's commitment that parks should be accessible, free spaces to enjoy by everyone are rooted within his own strong views of accessibility. He challenged the notion that parks should be exclusive to only the most elite and should be available to the public. And because of what we know about Oregon's history of exclusion, we recognize that many notions of public in those times did not include Black, Indigenous, or people of color, nor did it recognize this land as Native American land. However, Olmsted, as an abolitionist and environmental conservationist, was, like many progressive leaders of this era, a force for good during this time in history and a visionary who seeded the roots of what today has become a truly accessible and inclusive park system, and one of our proudest Portland treasures that is loved by this community. So in the 200 years since, generations of our community and Oregonians have now benefited from this vision. And in honor of this legacy as Parks Commissioner, today we're recommitting to a stewardship of our parks and natural spaces and trails in a manner inclusive of all Portlanders and which are safe, welcoming, and accessible to all. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Commissioner Mapps, then Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, colleagues. Let me start out by thanking Commissioner Rubio for bringing this item forward. And I want to thank Suzanne, Mike, and Jim for that really informative and educational presentation. I'm delighted to join you in proclaiming April 26, 2022 to be Frederick Law Olmsted Day here in Portland, Oregon. But I have to confess, when I first saw this item on today's agenda, it wasn't obvious to me why we were bringing this proclamation forth. Of course, I know and admire Frederick Law Olmsted. He was born in 1822, died in 1903. He's the father of landscape architecture. Frederick Law Olmsted designed some of the most beloved public spaces in America. Even if you don't recognize the name Frederick Law Olmsted, you probably know and admire his work. For example, if you like New York City's Central Park, Boston's Emerald Necklace, the UC Berkeley campus, the Stanford campus, or the University of Chicago campus, then you're a fan of Olmsted's work. He designed all of those spaces and dozens more too. And this year marks the 200th anniversary of his birth. Those are all things to celebrate. Still, up until recently, I did not think of Olmsted as being a Portland guy. There are no parks in Portland that were designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, but thanks to this proclamation, I learned that there is a connection between Olmsted and Portland, and it comes through his son, John Charles Olmsted. As we heard today, John Charles Olmsted worked in his father's landscape design firm, and in 1903, that firm was hired by an early version of Portland's Park Bureau to develop the city's first comprehensive plan for a park system. The plan that Olmsted presented to City Council in 1904 was visionary. He proposed a comprehensive system of parks and parkways. Unfortunately, most of those parks that were presented in the first plan were never built. But that first parks plan laid the foundation for how Portland thinks about, plans for, and manages our city's parks. Now, Portland hired Olmsted's landscape and architectural firm because they were the world's leading purveyor of the City Beautiful movement. Now, the City Beautiful movement was an approach to urban planning which was popular in the late 1800s and early 1900s and helped shape the way many American cities, including Portland, look. As the name suggests, this movement was focused on making cities more beautiful. The City Beautiful movement was reacting to the fact that in the late 1800s, early 1900s, American cities were grim, gritty, and largely industrial landscapes. Advocates of the City Beautiful movement wanted to make cities more livable by building things like parks. Advocates of this design philosophy argued that such beautification would make for a happier, healthier, and more virtuous citizenry. So as we prepare to celebrate the life and legacy of Frederick Law Olmsted, I hope that we here in Portland also remember his son, John Charles Olmsted. He helped create the city that we all know and love today. Colleagues, for these reasons and more, I'm glad to join you in declaring April 26th, 2022 to be Frederick Law Olmsted Day here in Portland, Oregon. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm
Commissioner Ryan.
All right,
Go ahead.
sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Rubio, Parks Foundation leader, Suzanne Bishop, and Mike and Jim. Now I know the 40-mile loop is actually 150 miles long, and it brings together 5 municipalities. Great work. Colleagues, I'm really excited to join you in this moment of remembrance and reflection, to offer gratitude to the vision, foresight of Frederick Law Olmsted. And as Commissioner Mapps, Professor Mapps just schooled me on, of course, his son, John Charles Olmsted. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I specifically want to highlight Olmsted's advocacy for livability, and his work established the concept of open space as a necessary part of urban infrastructure. So much of what makes Portland today, Portland, is this livable green metropolis, which is outlined in the 1903 Olmsted Report to the Park Board. I just love that he said he advocated for to secure the future by acquiring land. We need more so than, and we did so more than Seattle up north. Little personal Northwest rivalry pride there. And he advocated that our parks should be part of a system, and that system should be comprehensive and well balanced with public squares, playgrounds, parks, and boulevards. And today we do have a wide variety of expansion of parks, and we're doing great work to expand them in East Portland at this moment. And he advocated for boulevards and parkways, which led to the tree-lined boulevards, which I know a lot of us enjoy, such as Northeast Ainsworth and Northeast 72nd. Olmsted advocated that parks are governed by qualified officials and cared for by the specially trained people, which is also the standard today. Recognize the importance and skill required to manage and maintain public spaces. And hats off to Director Long and her team for living up to that vision. So today, I'm happy to join my colleagues in recognizing the contributions of the nationally and locally of the Olmsteds, their family, for securing this future that we live in today. And now it's our responsibility to build on that of Olmsted's vision and into the future for many, many generations of Portlanders to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Before I read the proclamation, I want to thank Commissioner Rubio and her team for bringing this proclamation forward. It's important that we understand and embrace the history of the city, and this is certainly an important part of it. I also want to thank our guests, Jim, Mike, and Suzanne, for the commentary, for your time and your energy in helping to draft the proclamation that I am going to read now on behalf of the Portland City Council. Whereas Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. fostered equitable access to parks for all people and is considered the founder of the profession of landscape architecture, was born on April 26, 1822. And whereas Frederick Law Olmsted Sr.'s progressive social views, including his ardent support for the abolition of slavery, gave rise to public urban landscapes that were intended for all, regardless of color, wealth, or social standing. And whereas Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. created Central Park, Prospect Park, and many other parks explicitly to provide opportunities for the poor and those lacking the means to escape the city as a respite from urban life and to promote human health. And whereas Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. was an early contributor to the New York Times, where he documented the evils of the institution of slavery in graphic detail in his work, The Cotton Kingdom. And whereas Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. played a significant role in the creation of the national park system, beginning with his advocacy to establish Yosemite National Park. And whereas Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. promoted parks as essential public infrastructure to promote a more healthful city and as a democratic space that creates community. Whereas his son, John Charles Olmsted, a co-founder of the American Society of Landscape Architects, was brought to Portland in 1903 by the Volunteer Park Board to develop a park master plan for the city of Portland. And whereas his master plan reflected the same commitments to equitable access for everyone and to the creation of a comprehensive and interconnected system of parks, natural landscapes, parkways, and boulevards for human health and a healthy economy. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim April 26th, 2022, to be Frederick Law Olmsted Day in Portland, and encourage all residents to recognize and celebrate the 200th anniversary of the birth of Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. and the contributions of John Charles Olmsted and the Olmsted firm to inspiring park, natural area, and trail planning in the city of Portland and the entire metropolitan region. Thank you all for being here today. Commissioner Rubio, thank you for bringing the proclamation forward.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. All right, with that, colleagues, we will now move to the regular agenda. We'll start with item 303, please.
Accept bid of Brown Contracting, Inc. for the 4M Bikeway project for $1,282,821.
Colleagues, in April of 2012, the City Council adopted the East Portland in Motion Implementation Strategy Report, which includes the 4M Bikeway project. This project will help develop and enhance a connected, low-stress bike network in East Portland between Southeast 130th and 135th and between 151st and 122nd Avenue. Chief Procurement Officer Biko Taylor is here to present the report. Good morning, Biko.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler. Good morning, commissioners. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Excellent. For the record, I'm Biko Taylor, Chief Procurement Officer. On this particular matter, City Council approved ordinance number 190249 on January 6, 2021. The engineering estimate was $1.382 million, and the confidence level was moderate. Procurement Services issued the invitation to bid on February 24, 2022, with a due date of February 3rd, 2022. In total, 4 bids were received. Brown Contracting is the low bidder and recommended awardee. Their proposal came in at 7.24% under budget. The city's equity and contracting aspirational goal of 20% for hard construction costs for subcontractor and supplier utilization of firms certified by the state of Oregon applies to this project. Brown Contracting has committed to subcontract 20.05% to COVID certified firms. Of that, a negligible percentage was awarded to MBEs. The total COVID commitment from Brown is $257,000 on that $1.2 million contract. With that, those are my remarks. Any questions?
Thanks, Biko. Colleagues, any questions at this particular point? Keelan, do we have anybody signed up for this report?
No one signed up.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move.
Commissioner Ryan moves. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Hardesty seconds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Thank you, Director Taylor. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
I look forward to the day when our new contracting services provides more opportunity for minority-owned firms. And I know that's coming up next on the agenda. So for this particular one, I'm going to vote aye. But I'm once again disappointed at what we call equity in city contracting.
Maps,
I'm glad to see this project move forward. I share Commissioner Hardesty's concerns about some of the minority contracting issues here, but I also know that procurement has plans in place to help us do better. And for these reasons, I vote aye.
Rubio,
Thank you, Director Taylor, for bringing this forward. I also share my colleagues' concerns, so I won't repeat them, but looking forward to the next agenda item. I vote aye.
Wheeler,
Aye. The report is accepted. Next item, item number 304, please.
authorize Chief Procurement Officer to conduct a competitive solicitation process for a disparity study and award a contract not to exceed $1 million over 5 years.
Colleagues, item 304, 305, and 306 definitely have never mind. This is a second reading, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the second reading and make my comments then. Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Thank you. Mayor, I got a little lost there for a minute. Are we reading? We're just doing.
Yeah, no, this is a second reading. Go ahead and we'll just call the roll.
Okay, got it. And we're on 305. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mayor and Director Taylor, for your work to bring this.
Commissioner Ryan, I'm sorry, we're on 304. Just to be
At 304.
Yeah.
I officially got lost. All right, 304. There we are. Sorry about that. And this is a second reading. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Director Taylor, for bringing this forward today. During the first presentation, I was surprised to learn that it has been more than a decade since the city's last disparities study was published. During my time on council, we've had an array of contracts presented, and I've always been surprised at the inconsistencies of equity goal attaining in our contracting. And I don't feel as though I've ever gotten a clear answer as to why the disparity exists in one project but not another. I guess what I'm saying is that I look forward to digging into the data and the study and the recommendations, the ways that council can support the city's ongoing work eradicating systemic barriers that over many years have and continue to create deep economic inequities for firms owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color and women. Thank you for your leadership. I'm inspired that we're moving forward. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
Procurement at the city of Portland is something I've paid attention to for over 30 years. And have testified many times about the lack of opportunity for minority and women-owned firms in the city of Portland. I am really thrilled that Director Taylor has a vision about how we move forward to actually really become the city we keep telling ourselves we are, because we're not. If you look at the outcomes, we're clearly not the diverse, inclusive city that we try to tell people we are. I look forward to this disparity study actually being used to inform how we move forward in contracting at the city of Portland. Unfortunately, I was around the last time we did a disparity study, 12-volume copy, spent a few $1 million on it, and leadership changed and they sat on a shelf, and I bet no one can find them today. I'm looking forward to Director Taylor moving us into a new era of contracting at the city of Portland. And the three proposals that he has brought forward today starts us down that path. I have been just as I was going to say brutal, but I don't think Director Taylor would say I was brutal. I've been kind of clear with procurement about our lack of outcomes and our lack of curiosity about why the outcomes were not changing. The best find we've made is hiring Director Taylor to lead this transformation in procurement. And I want him to know here publicly that he has my 100% support and moving forward to make us a city that actually honestly walks our talk. I'm happy to vote aye.
Max.
I want to thank the mayor for bringing this item forward. I'm actually really excited about this item and the other packages of reforms that we'll hear about shortly. During my entire time on council, we have been frustrated by some of the inequities which are baked into our contracting system, especially on low bid contracts. I think it's important that we move beyond the old way of doing things. I believe that this disparity study is the first step towards building a better system. And for these reasons, I am glad to vote aye.
Rubio.
I want to thank Director Taylor for spearheading these initiatives. I'm going to make comments for the package of initiatives right now. Director Taylor, your time at the city hasn't been long, but you're already taking on major projects with our partners to improve the city's contracting practices. And that speaks volumes about your values. And I am so excited for this work. For decades, these issues have gone unaddressed in any consequential way. And I'm thrilled that we have this real opportunity to significantly improve access to BIPOC contractors, improve accountability, and also elevate our workforce in a way that hasn't been done before. And at this point, we have a moral imperative to close the gap between what we aspire to be and what we ensure happens on our watch, and for where we need to hold ourselves accountable to. And we can never recover the decades of lost opportunities in the past, but we can set a new course for the future for contractors to have access to equitable opportunities and ultimately generate economic benefits and generational wealth for their communities. And none of this should be done alone, and we need collaboration with our community partners to ensure that we're keeping an integrity to these goals. So I'm excited to see what Dr. Taylor will do, or Director Taylor will do with this new ordinance or this package of ordinances. And I also want to thank him and the community stakeholders for this great set of actions. And my office is ready to support in any way. I vote aye.
Taylor.
Well, I'd like to take a moment to thank Biko, our Chief Procurement Officer, Biko Taylor, and the procurement team for their hard work on this. Thank you. Over the last year, they've assessed current methods, they've researched best practices nationally, and they've engaged very diverse stakeholder groups to develop thoughtful, equity-centered change for how we're going to do procurement moving forward. And in doing so, they're helping us to live out our values, or especially those of anti-racism and equity. This particular item will authorize a study. It will provide us with current market data to tailor social equity programs to better serve BIPOC firms in our community. It's something we've wanted for a long time. We're finally doing it. I'm happy about that. I vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. Item number 305 is also a second reading.
Authorize Chief Procurement Officer to pilot inclusive contracting policies designed to attract firms owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color and women-owned firms to increase eligibility for contract opportunities, expand opportunities for business development, and foster wealth creation through inclusive contracting practices and equitable economic opportunities.
Colleagues, this is the second reading as well. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Thank you again, Mayor and Director Taylor, for your work to bring this to the dais today. I feel honored to work with a city that recognizes and seeks to break down the systemic barriers and discrimination based on race and gender. And I feel lucky to be part of a city council that will invigorate change in how the city of Portland conducts our business with firms owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color and women. I want to thank the community members who spoke last week in support of this accountable, transparent, and inclusive contracting policies designed to generate wealth and attract firms owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color and women. I recognize there's no single solution, but this is definitely a step in the right direction for Portland. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
I'm glad to see this pilot move forward. My only request to the director would be is as you develop this project, I encourage you to reach out to and engage in dialogue with bureau directors and chief engineers at our infrastructure bureaus, just so we have a full conversation there. But I'm confident that this will move us towards a better contracting system. And for those reasons, I vote aye.
Rubio.
Happy to vote aye. I made my comments before.
Wheeler.
So this pilot expands certification options for minority business in our community to attract more BIPOC-owned firms to the area by creating wealth building opportunities, something we should obviously support. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Item number 306, also a second reading of a non-emergency ordinance.
Adopt a regional workforce equity agreement and equity contracting program for alternative public improvement contracts with engineers estimate valued over $5 million and direct chief procurement officer to implement agreement requirements.
Colleagues, need further discussion on this second reading? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Thank you. And I now see why last week, of course, we coupled all of these together. And I just want to again thank you, Mayor and Director Taylor, for bringing these ordinances forward. I just want to acknowledge how great it was to keep hearing from the groups of supporters last week who all backed this ordinance and the development of a regional workforce equity agreement. And I'll always be an advocate to keep pushing upstream in our K-12 system to make sure that that's a part of this work. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I'm glad we're finally signing on the dotted line to create opportunities across governmental jurisdictions for minority business owners to build their businesses. It's crazy. It's taken us so long to get to this place that we're actually looking holistically at how we help the next generation of contractors get access and get opportunity. So I'm very happy to vote aye on this item.
Maps.
This is another reform that I'm glad to see move forward. The feedback that I have on this is the same as my feedback on the last item. Director Taylor, as you move forward with this project, I just encourage you to engage in a dialogue with the bureau directors and chief engineers over at the infrastructure bureaus. But I'm happy to vote aye, and I look forward to the progress on this project.
Rubio.
I'm again very thrilled for this project, and I've already made my comments in before. I'm very happy to vote aye.
Wheeler.
This regional workforce agreement centers workforce development and better recruits, retains, and protects women and BIPOC workers and firms. I vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. We'll now move to item number 3.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Could we take a quick break?
Why don't we do that? Colleagues, we still have 8 items left. If any of those are yours, I would encourage us to be as to the point as possible on these. We'll go ahead and how much time would you like, Commissioner Hardesty?
5 minutes would be fine.
Very good. It's 11:55. We will reconvene at noon straight up. Thank you. We're in
Recess.
Thank you. That's the word I was struggling to find. Recess. Thanks.
Recording stopped.
2021 through 2025 Consolidated Plan and the FY 2021 through 22 Action Plan to adopt and authorize submission of the Home American Rescue Plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to apply and accept program funds totaling $13,567,782.
Commissioner Ryan.
Sorry about that. I just got back from the break. Oh, God. Bear with me, people. I wish we were live at the moment so I could at least speak. There we go. Thank you, Mayor. What a lovely day it is. And colleagues for joining me today alongside our partners at the Portland Housing Bureau to bring forward this important amendment regarding the Home American Rescue Plan. Colleagues, with the passage of the American Rescue Plan, ARP Act of 2021, the U.S. Congress made available $5 billion for homelessness assistance and assistance to other population facing various forms of housing instability. It's also important to note to the public that this is a special one-time program allocation that Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, is making available to jurisdictions that qualify for the annual federal home entitlement allocation. Portland Home Consortium, that includes the City of Portland as the lead agency and partners of City of Gresham and Multnomah County, is a qualifying jurisdiction. While the Home ARP is a formula-based allocation, awardees such as the Portland Home Consortium need to apply for the funds in the form of a Home ARP allocation plan for HUD review and approval. So, Portland Home Consortium has prepared such a plan and has brought this forward to City Council today for adoption and authorization for submittal to HUD. The Home ARP plan, I just said app, the Home ARP plan was prepared according to the HUD guidelines that include stakeholder consultation and public participation processes that are detailed in this plan. The plan also includes specifics on the amount of funding and proposed activity levels of funding. By submitting this plan to HUD, the Portland Consortium is certifying that the funded projects and actions will further fair housing and that the available Home ARP funds will be used consistent with the program eligible activities and cost. I will now pass the mic to the Portland Housing Director, Shannon Callahan, and the Joint Office Interim Director, Shannon Singleton, who will share a brief presentation on that covers the basics of this Home ARP plan and programming as it relates to the city. Director Callahan and Shannon Singleton, please take this away.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Shannon Callahan of the Portland Housing Bureau. Could we please have the slide deck put up? Thank you. Today, as Commissioner Ryan indicated, we're here to ask your support for an amendment to our Housing and Urban Development Action Plan. Commissioner Ryan has given you an overview of where these funds are coming from. But I would just like to make sure that you understand that these are very similar to our base allocation of home funds from the federal government. But there is one key difference. And that difference is that it allows for us to purchase and develop a non-congregate shelter with these funds. Next slide, please. So to receive these funds, a jurisdiction is required to amend our action plan after a community process that identifies community priorities. And in 2021 and early 2022, the Housing Bureau, in collaboration with the Joint Office, held a series of community forums. Next slide, please. We also conducted online surveys, and there was a clear and emerging community need for additional shelter programs and additional shelter supports. Next slide. As Commissioner Ryan indicated, the city, county, and Gresham all participate in a local home consortium, which is managed by the Portland Housing Bureau. Gresham will receive just over $2 million of this allocation, and the city and county are proposing to combine their allocations, which is just over $11.3 million for the purposes of providing motel shelter for up to 137 households. Next slide, please. During the pandemic, the Housing Bureau and the Joint Office worked collaboratively to identify potential motel sites that could serve as a shelter or transitional housing, but could also be later developed into affordable housing. One of the sites we identified was the Roadway Inn in the Park Rose neighborhood. In anticipation of the acquisition of the site using these home funds, the Joint Office entered into a lease for the motel. While we took the time necessary to meet the administrative requirements of funding, we also wanted to make sure that we were moving rapidly to get folks off the streets and into shelter. I'm now going to turn it over to Interim Director Shannon Singleton to talk a little bit about how the shelter is currently operating and how we anticipate it operating once we purchase the site.
Thank you. Shannon Singleton, my pronouns are she and her, and I'm with the Joint Office. This current shelter, what started as a response to the need to do more physical distancing due to COVID, has really evolved into a longer-term motel sheltering program. We worked with our partners, Do Good Multnomah, to transition a motel shelter they were operating at 82nd and bring their staff who have that experience into this site. I do want to note that the 82nd Avenue Motel shelter that they transferred their services from is owned by the county and will be reopening shortly as a 43-bed shelter and transitional living facility for people experiencing homelessness and with severe and persistent mental illnesses. So we are not losing that capacity in our community. We currently have a block room agreement. So we have the rooms reserved for folks who are individuals or couples experiencing homelessness. Do Good, as I said, is operating it as a low barrier shelter program. They are particularly looking to serve folks who are extremely vulnerable and particularly, again, to COVID-19. They also work with one of our service partners to provide food services, Our Streets PDX, which is one of our BIPOC community-based organizations. The funds would afford our community the opportunity to acquire a large site for our current shelter use and also for that repurposing into a future redevelopment as affordable housing. I will turn it back over to Director Callahan and we'll stay around for any questions.
Thank you, Shannon. As Director Singleton mentioned, one of the key features of this acquisition is that we will be reserving in a deed restriction or otherwise the ability for us to land bank this site, use as a shelter now, and take the opportunity for future vibrant, affordable housing development in the Park Rose neighborhood in the future. I'm happy to take your questions.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Callahan and Interim Director Singleton. Is the whole 13 million going to be used at this one property?
Commissioner, it is just over $11 million, $11.3 million. Gresham's portion is going to Gresham, and there's also administrative funding that is going to support the team that is working on this acquisition. But the entire $11.3 million is going to acquire the site.
So the goal is to purchase the site. And is that enough to develop the site, or is that just to own the motel?
It is for us to purchase the site, own the motel, reduce the long-term operating costs of running the motel, and then be able to have a site for future affordable housing development.
Thank you for that. As I looked at what these funds could be used for, there is a lot of, like I thought about the small pod villages, and it's fine. I mean, it's fine. This is 130 some units, family units, right? But I just can't help but just say, again, it's like a drip in the Titanic, right? When you think about the magnitude of our houseless population. And so I just wanted to ask that question. If there was additional resources to do things innovative, like, again, like small villages, car rest areas, et cetera, et cetera. But this part I understand is just for this one property to acquire the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Mapps.
Yes, Of this 13 million, how much is specifically targeted towards Portland? What's Portland's share of that, of the larger grant?
The total grant, Portland's portion, let me go back, let me pull that up so I can make sure I'm speaking correctly. Portland's is 10.8 million, Multnomah County's is $500,000, and the city of Gresham is $2.2 million.
Can you tell me Portland's again?
Certainly, just a second. 10.8 million. Gresham is 2.2 and Multnomah County is 5.2. I'm sorry, is 500,000.
Okay, I think maybe the documents I have there might be a Scribner's error, or I see Portland having 350,000 or 320,000. But I trust you. There's probably a mistake made somewhere.
I'm sorry about that if there's a document mistake, but no, it is a sizable amount.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Mapps. Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this emergency ordinance?
No one signed up, Mayor.
Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Thank you, Director Callahan and Interim Director Singleton. I'm really grateful we are taking on this urgent business today. It will allow us to focus on this humanitarian crisis today and for the long-term opportunity for permanent housing at this site. I've had the pleasure of going to this site twice, and I really think it's the right purchase at the right time. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
I'm a big fan of us buying properties rather than continuing to rent hotel rooms that can ultimately turn into permanent housing people can afford to live in. I just have to say, when I hear $11 million and we're only buying one property, when I do the math, it makes me a little nervous. Because again, the magnitude of the need that we have is really significant. And again, taking nothing away from this property and this project, but 11 million seems like a lot of money for one project that is not actually developing permanent housing people can afford to live in. So I guess I'll just have to wait and get updates on, like, what are we doing with $11 million that doesn't lead to permanent housing people can afford to live in. But today I'll vote aye and trust the process.
Maps,
I'm glad to see this project move forward. I'm very familiar with this particular property. Certainly needed, especially in that community. Great access to the Park Rose Transit Center. Brings on 137 units of units where you have your own door. I think that's great. So I'm glad to vote aye.
Rubio,
I want to thank the staff at the Housing Bureau and the Joint Office for working on this project. It's an important one. We need to take the opportunities that present themselves to us when we can. And I'm glad that we're tackling the issue with partners, and I'm looking forward to seeing this project develop. I vote aye.
Wheeler,
Good luck. I vote aye. Thanks for bringing it. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 308. This is a non-emergency ordinance.
approve application under the multiple unit limited tax exemption program under the inclusionary housing program for Southeast 27th and Division Apartments located at 2680 Southeast Division Street.
Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, in partnership with the Housing Bureau, I'm excited to bring forward an ordinance today for Southeast 27th and Division Apartments. This complex is a 5-story, 52-unit residential only apartment building comprised of 32 studios, 12 one-bedrooms, and 8 two-bedroom units. With us today, we have Housing Bureau Planning Manager Matthew Scheibold and Development Incentive Program Manager Dory Van Brockel, who will share a brief presentation and answer any questions council members might have. Matthew, Dory, please take it away.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. I will be brief. Before you is a multi-approval for an IH project, as Commissioner Ryan mentioned. It's on regular agenda because it is a reconfiguration. It's a 52-unit building, reconfiguring 4 units into 3. So we will have 1 studio and 2 two-bedroom IH units. The Housing Bureau is recommending approval as the rents are well below market rents, and the property tax exemption will only be on the affordable units as it's outside the central city. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Colleagues, any questions? Keelan, do we have any testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. Last chance, colleagues, if there's any questions. This is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Item 309, please, which is also a non-emergency ordinance.
Create a local improvement district to construct street, sidewalk, and stormwater improvements in the southeast 155th Avenue and Main Street, Mill Main Drive Local Improvement District.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. The council adopted resolution number 37568 on March 16th of 22, declaring its intent to initiate this local improvement district formation proceedings and establish the name of the local improvement district at the southeast 155th Avenue and Main Street. Millman Drive Local Improvement District is what it will be known as from here on out. I will turn it over to Andrew for a brief presentation on what we're doing. Take it away, Andrew.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. For the record, I'm Andrew Abbey, Local Improvement District Administrator. I'm going to try to keep my presentation to about 90 seconds or less. Keelan, could we switch over to the presentation, please? And if we could just jump to slide number 2. So this is a map of the proposed local improvement district that we discussed back in March. You can see that we're making improvement to 3 frontages along Park Lane Park. You have Southeast Main Street and Southeast Mill Main Drive on the south edge of Park Lane Park and Southeast 155th Avenue. We'll get a new fire code compliant cul-de-sac at the north end of Park Lane Park, which will also improve emergency response to the park. So those are the 3 frontage improvements that would be constructed by the LID, which would help facilitate land use approvals for the park expansion. Before I just move over to the next slide, I would just say the Centennial neighborhood of East Portland only has about 44.7% sidewalk coverage versus the citywide average of 63.0%. So we're particularly happy to be able to deliver additional sidewalks that are much needed in this area of East Portland. Moving on to the next slide. And this LID, as I mentioned, will help facilitate land use approvals for the park. I have my colleague Sandra Berthos joining me today from Portland Parks and Recreation. She is the project manager of the park expansion from 5 to 25 acres. This is a rendition of the future improvements. And Sandra is available to answer any questions you might have about the planned park improvements. And I'm here to answer any questions that council might have about the LID. The only property owner that would be assessed by the LID is Portland Parks and Recreation, and they obviously have no objection to the formation of the local improvement district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes testimony, unless there are questions.
Very good, colleagues. Any questions? Keelan, any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you, Andrew. It moves to second reading. Let's see, where are we? 310, second reading.
Authorize the Portland Bureau of Transportation to implement an event parking district in Lloyd.
Colleagues, this is a second reading. We've already taken testimony and had a presentation. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Hardesty and the PBOT staff for the bringing this forward last week, answering so many questions. The public testimony was superb, and I also appreciate hearing about the outreach that you've done with the neighborhood event spaces like Moda Center and including the Blazers in that process. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
As someone who used to live right on the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and Multnomah Avenue, I can tell you that I was locked at home every time there was an event that happened either at the Moda Center or the Convention Center, because parking just did not exist until those events were over. I am so proud of the work PBOT did to bring both Lloyd business owners, Lloyd Center business owners, as well as neighbors together to make this event parking program possible. And I'm very happy to vote aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty and Piwat for their work on this. I want to echo the appreciation for the extensive outreach on this project, and I'm happy to vote aye.
Wheeler,
I think this was extremely well handled. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I was looking for potential strains in this or opposition in this. And the obvious concern that one might have had is, as we are trying to encourage people to come back into the central city core, including on the east side, as we are encouraging people to participate in larger scale events, anytime we think about raising parking rates, there could be an outcry from particularly local businesses that might be concerned about raising the cost of coming into the central city. Quite the opposite happened here. They were engaged early. They were part of the process. I had an opportunity to not only hear the testimony from business owners and operators in Go Lloyd, I had the opportunity late last week to visit with some of the Go Lloyd folks, actually earlier this week, and they reiterated their strong support for this effort. So great work. I'm happy to support this and vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Next item is 311. Sorry, go ahead, Keelan.
sorry. Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder and provide payment for construction of the Sullivan Pump Station Safety Improvements Project number E11356 for an estimated cost of $1,040,000.
All right, this is a non-emergency ordinance. Commissioner Maps.
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, this ordinance authorizes the Bureau of Emergency Services to make urgently needed safety improvements to a critical part of our city's wastewater treatment system. The Bureau of Environmental Services manages 99 pump stations, and we have safety concerns about just one. The Sullivan Pump Station, which is located in Southeast Portland under the intersection of I-5 and I-84. This pump station sends sewage through city pipes to the Columbia Boulevard Water Treatment Center. This facility was constructed in the early 1950s, and this facility shows the same level of concern for operator safety that you might find in a car built in the early 1950s. In other words, there are many well-known safety risks at this pump station, which need to be fixed if we're going to continue to require BES staff to work in this space. Now, the unsafe conditions here are not particularly dramatic. We're talking about things like ladders that are too steep and equipment that is difficult and risky to access. The fixes here are also straightforward. The site needs things like modified platforms, permanent ladders, and guardrails. The estimated cost of this project is a little more than $1 million. We hope to begin installing new safety equipment in September and finish this work before the end of the calendar year. Here to tell us more about this project, we have two staff members from BES, Bhargavi Ambedkar and project manager Eric Thomas. I will turn it over to BES staff now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. I am Eric Thomas, a structural engineer with BES. I am the project manager for the Sullivan Pump Station Safety Improvement Project. We're here today requesting permission to move forward with bidding on an important project at Sullivan Pump Station. Next slide, please. The sole purpose of this project is to improve the safety of working conditions for operations and maintenance personnel at Sullivan Pump Station. These safety issues have been a concern for many years, and one of the existing unsafe conditions has led to a time loss injury. Next slide, please. One issue that we will address is safety for accessing the pumps. The existing guardrails shown in this picture prevent easy and safe access to the pumps for maintenance or for removal of the pump protection cages that surround the shafts at the top of the picture. In the past, workers have resorted to unsafe means to perform their work, such as standing on the guardrail while leaning and reaching a large distance, or worse, climbing over the guardrail to stand on the wet and slippery pump. Next slide, please. We will also eliminate the need to use these steep ship's stairs, as shown in this picture, to access a pump for maintenance or to travel from one pump to another pump. Next slide, please. Shown here is the existing platform layout. The pumps are located with the red circles, and you can see that the edges of the existing platforms are a few feet from the pumps themselves. This distance, along with the guardrail previously shown, hinders access to the pumps. Additionally, you can see how the platform that surrounds each pump is separated from the other platforms, which requires multiple trips up and down the steep stairs shown in the previous picture. Next slide, please. Shown here is the proposed new platform layout. There will be one large U-shaped platform at an essentially constant elevation, and that will be lower and closer to the pumps. The platform proximity to the pumps and overall geometry were coordinated with the pump station maintenance group and will provide them a safer working environment. Next slide, please. Another item that we will address is to enlarge the existing platform shown in this picture to provide safe access to the mechanical unit that is located near the top of the picture. Right now, maintenance personnel need to use a tall extension ladder leaned against the platform to perform their work. Next slide, please. Another item that we will address is related to safe access to the mechanical unit located on the top of the lid shown in this picture. We propose to provide a permanent wall-mounted ladder and guardrail around the edge of that lid so that access is safer and compliant with OSHA fall protection requirements. Right now, the ladder that leans against the wall is used for access, and no guardrail is present at the edge of that walking and working surface. Next slide, please. Another item that we will address is the relocation of the existing light fixtures shown in this picture to a place where they can be safely accessed from a platform by maintenance personnel. Right now, maintenance has to unsafely reach far beyond the edge of the existing platform. The use of an extension ladder is extremely difficult and unsafe in this congested area. Next slide, please. The final item that we will address is the relocation of valves for the hydraulic oil system that require periodic operation and maintenance. The existing valves are located approximately 14 feet above the floor, as shown in the picture, and also located directly above a large pipe. The geometry and congestion of the space prevents safe use of an extension ladder. The valves will be relocated so they can be accessed while standing on the new platform. Next slide, please. The engineer's estimate for this project is $1.04 million with a high confidence level. We acknowledge that this is a lot of money for new and modified platforms and relocation of light fixtures and hydraulic valves. The challenges associated with performing work in a crowded and operating pump station, as well as the current labor market, current high price of steel, and current supply chain issues have all contributed to the cost of this project. We intend to advertise the project in May, begin construction in September, and we expect the construction to take a maximum of 1 year. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your consideration. We would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Keelan, is there any public testimony on this non-emergency ordinance?
No one signed up.
All right, this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you for a very thorough presentation and for the photos. That's actually very helpful. Item 312, please. This is a non-emergency ordinance.
Authorize bid solicitation and contracting with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder for construction of the groundwater pump station motor control center replacement project for an estimated cost of $2,425,000.
Commissioner Maps.
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, the last ordinance we heard dealt with a Bureau of Environmental Services pump station. The item in front of us right now also deals with a pump station, but this facility is operated by the Water Bureau. As you know, Portland's Water Bureau delivers water to nearly a quarter of all Oregonians. Now, most of the time, that water comes from the rivers and streams in the Bull Run watershed. But when there's a problem with the Bull Run watershed, Portland has the ability to switch to a backup water supply, groundwater. For example, you might remember last November, a tree fell on one of the Bureau's water treatment facilities, and Portland switched to groundwater for a couple of days. Now, the ordinance before us now deals with the Water Bureau's groundwater pump station, which is the engine which drives Portland's groundwater system. Here's the problem. The motor control centers at the groundwater pump station need to be replaced because they are obsolete. These motors were installed in 1983. This equipment was expected to last 25 to 30 years. As of today, that equipment is 39 years old. Many of the components used in these motor control centers are no longer being manufactured, and finding used parts has become difficult. Replacing this equipment will minimize the risk of catastrophic failures at the Water Bureau's groundwater pump station. Here to tell us more about this important project, we have the Water Bureau's Chief Engineer, Jody Inman. Jody, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Maps and Mayor. I will keep this very brief. Can you pull up the presentation? I've got about 3 slides. Next slide, please. As Commissioner Maps indicated, we are blessed to have 2 supplies for supplying water to our Portland residents. This groundwater program is our primary backup supply and is a very critical component of our emergency response. It is also a critical component of a climate change tool, and that we use this for summer augmentation. Goals for our groundwater program include repairing and replacing components to maintain that readiness and ensuring compliance with water quality and regulations. Next slide. I know pictures are always fun to see. These are what the motor controller centers look like. Not very exciting. They are large metal cabinets. They are way past their expected useful life. And when one of them goes, it takes out the ability for any of our pumps to run. We have multiple large pumps at our groundwater pump station and a couple of smaller pumps. This project will be replacing the motor controller centers for all of those units over the next several years, phased in so that we have adequate backup supply when we need it. Next slide. In short and sweet, there is our request to authorize the solicitation for the lowest responsive bidder for this project at the value of estimated cost of $2,425,000. With that, I'll take questions.
Colleagues, any questions? And if not, Keelan, do we have any public testimony?
No one signed up.
Very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. We'll move back to the consent agenda, please. Item number 294.
Pay settlement of Charlie Ollinger property damage claim for the sum of $49,833 involving Portland Parks and Recreation.
Mayor, if I may.
Commissioner Hursti.
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled this off consent because it was so close to the 50,000 that we have agreed as a council that if there was a settlement that we would actually not put it on consent. Because it was $49,800.25. I thought it was good to just pull it off consent. I don't have any issues with the settlement at all. I just wanted to model the behavior that we're after.
Very good. And we have David Farrow here to answer any questions if anybody has any. Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No, Mayor.
Very good. Commissioner Hardesty, was there anything you wanted to hear particular to this settlement?
No, sir, I think it's an appropriate settlement. I just, again, it was so close to our 50,000 threshold. I did not want it to, just squeak through without taking it off consent in case the public wanted to.
Very good. Keelan, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Item 296, please.
Accept the Chief Procurement Officer's recommendation for contract to SP Plus Municipal Services for Smart Park Garage operations.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I have an amendment to put on the table for this item. The amendment reads as follows: SP Plus Municipal Services for an initial term of 3 years upon City Council approval and a mutual agreement of the parties. The contract may be extended for up to 2 additional years. The not to exceed amount shall be up to $7 million. And the council's conditional acceptance of this report is subject to the final contract's approval as to form by the city attorney's office. To the motion. This was presented as a potential 10-year contract, and I did not want to get us down to a path where we were just picking one company to run our smart parks. I think it's always good to go out and see who else is out there. And that's why I proposed this amendment to the initial item.
Very good. And I'll second it for discussion purposes. I'd like to hear from Michael Jacobs on this and better understand what the Bureau's response is.
The Bureau is, for the record, my name is Michael Jacobs. I'm the manager for the Smart Park Garages. The Bureau is absolutely fine with reducing this to a 5-year contract, starting with the 3 years and then going to City Council for an additional 2 years if we so choose to do that at that time.
Okay, very good. So operationally, I don't see any huge change here.
No.
There's no red flags. Okay, very good. Colleagues, any further questions? Keelan, any public testimony on this item?
No, Mayor.
All right, so we're voting on the amendment first, Commissioner Hardesty's amendment. Any further discussion or questions on the amendment? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan,
Thank you, Michael Jacobs, for being here and for your explanation. Based on what I just heard from you, I'll vote aye.
Hardesty,
That was an aye. Did you hear me?
oh, no, I missed it. Sorry. Thanks.
Don't worry.
Maps,
Yeah, based on the testimony you heard today, I'll vote aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment is adopted. Now to the main motion as amended is, well, actually, this is a report. So the main motion here would be to accept the report as amended. Any
So
further?
moved.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say so moved.
Fine. And I'll second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The report's accepted as amended by Commissioner Hardesty. That concludes our business for this morning, colleagues. I will see you in 1 hour and 18 minutes for our 2 p.m. session. We are adjourned.